started. Well, good morning. That is great. I don't have to ask you to do it again. Everybody's awake. Well, thank you for being here, and welcome to the 37th Annual Nashville Conference on African American History and Culture. I'm Tim Walker, the Executive Director of the Metro Historical Commission, and it's been a great honor for our commission to co-sponsor this event with Tennessee State University since its creation in 1981. The conference has been a real success over the past 37 years. With 120 profiles written about individuals and institutions that have contributed to the African American story in Nashville and in Tennessee, and over 250 presentations and performances. And if you've looked at your packet, we've also included a handout that lists all of the profiles over the last 37 years that are Author of the Year, a great resource. Well, today's conference adds to these accomplishments with 5 new profiles, a musical performance by TSU's Meister Singers, and a great program of 8 presenters. So you really have a full day. But before we get started, I want to quickly thank and recognize the conference's planning committee, several of whom have served, if you've been here before, they've served not only many years, but many decades. And we certainly couldn't do it without them. So if they would please stand as I call their name and remain standing. If you could, hold your applause until everyone's been called. So first, I'd like to recognize our longtime co-chairs of the event, Dr. Revis Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell. And that's all right. I'll go a little bit faster. And Miss Linda Wynn. And committee members Gloria Johnson, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at TSU, Pamela Bobo, Merle Tennyson, Gloria McKissick, Jessica Reeves, Jamal Sheets, Sharon Hall Smith, and Lee Williams. Thank you, they really earned that. I'd also like to recognize members of the Metro Historical Commission that are here with us. If you would please stand. And finally, I want to thank the staff working the registration tables from both TSU and our office, Scarlett Miles, Carolyn Eller, Paula Person, and Christy Green. And before I hand the podium over to Ms. Wynn, I want to make sure you are aware of the handout that Clay Bailey, the president of Friends of Fort Negley, put out on the front table. Please get one if you haven't gotten one, but it's concerning the neighbor reunion at Fort Negley on Saturday, February 24th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. So I hope you, or 12:30 p.m. So I hope you'll be able to go to that, and we can talk to you about that a little bit later. So now I'd like to introduce Miss Linda Wynn. Linda, if you know her, wears many hats. She's a very busy woman. Not only is she a noted writer and historian, a history professor at Fisk University, she's the assistant director of state programs for the Tennessee Historical Commission, and I'm really proud to say she serves on the Metro Historical Commission. Ms. Wynn.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning to each and every one of you. It's great to have so many people out this morning. I was a little worried last week, but the Lord shined on us, and it's not as cold as it has been, and I'm glad to see you out this morning. I would like to start off by thanking our financial supporters, some of whom have supported us the entire 37 years. Akibalon Images, Armark, the Frowson Foundation, Holy Trinity Episcopal Church, Jefferson Street Baptist Church, the Tennessee Historical Society, Spruce Street Baptist Church, and TSU Friends of the Library. Again, I would like to thank the committee members who helped to plan this conference and put it on each year. We meet, we discuss, and today is the final culmination of all the planning that we have been doing. In addition to thanking the staff of the Tennessee, not the Tennessee Historical Commission, but the staff of TSU, as well as the Metro Historical Commission, they deserve a lot of credit because we plan, but they really carry out our plans. So I really want to give them a warm thank you from the committee because without them, we could not pull this off. If you would just allow me, I would like to recognize the staff of the Tennessee Historical Commission, starting with Mr. Patrick McIntyre, who is my director. Patrick, if you would please stand. And also the members of the Tennessee Historical Commission staff, if you would stand. I'd like to thank Patrick in particular for the support that he gives to allow me to go off and plan this conference, and to my colleagues on the commission for coming out and supporting this conference. It's truly appreciated. You know, this year is a very important year, 2018. It's a year when we think about, obviously, the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It is also the sesquicentennial of the passage of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. It is also a year, if we go back 50 years, it's also the death of Robert Kennedy. It is also the year that during the Olympics that John Carlos and Smith stood and raised their hands in resistance to what was going on. You kind of see some of these things repeating themselves 50 years later. So with that, I am not going to continue. I will ask Pam Bobo to come forth so we can begin the conference. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing and talking to each of you.
Thank you, Linda. The theme for this year's conference is a panoramic view of Nashville, Tennessee. And all of our presenters today have contributed or will contribute fully to that particular theme. We do ask that you disable or put your cell phones on vibrate because this is being televised, and so we need minimal distractions. Our first presenter this morning is a historian from Vanderbilt University focusing on colonial Latin American and the Atlantic. She is a preservationist. She's an archivist. Among her biggest contributions have been with UNESCO's or being a representative for UNESCO for the Slave Route Project, and recently nominated, or she recently nominated Fort Negley for recognition by that organization. Will you please give a big Nashville Conference welcome to Dr. Jane Landers.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say what an honor it is to be asked to talk to you all today on this historic occasion. And I'd also like to thank Linda Wynn for inviting me, and Tim Walker for inviting me, Jessica Reeves for helping me get organized and getting me all kinds of passes and things that I needed to get here, Pamela Bobo for introducing me, thank you, and our TSU hosts. I have to probably get a little bit of help here to get this going. Let's see if I can. I think I got it. Is that right? Okay, Pamela got me all set up. Thank you. A little bit about my background and how I came to be such a fan of Fort Negley's and the African-American history of Nashville. I grew up in the Caribbean, that's part of it. I went to school and did all my education at the University of Florida, which is another part of it. And I lucked upon a wonderful topic for my dissertation that became my first book on the runaway slaves from the Carolinas and Georgia who crossed the first international border southward. The first Underground Railroad is southward 100 years before into Spanish Florida. And it was an accidental discovery, but it led me to this long career in trying to unearth the missing century of African-American history in United States history textbooks. If you pick up any textbook probably today, you'll see the history starting in 1619 with 20, they always say 20 and odd bedraggled Negroes getting off a slave ship in Jamestown. However, the first African to set foot on the United States, what is today the United States, was in 1513. A free African man named Juan Garrido, who goes to Portugal, then to Spain, and is involved in all the conquests and discoveries of the Caribbean before he comes to Florida in 1513. So I'm trying to change the history of African-American coursework and curriculum. I did some of that work in Florida. I wrote a textbook for the Florida schools. I worked a lot with teachers, K through 12 teachers, to give them materials that would let them teach it differently. And I worked as a graduate student to do the research for why these runaways from the Anglo world to the north were running southward to the Spanish world of Florida. And the reason, it turns out, was that the Spaniards had a whole different legal system and religious system that gave freedom to people of African descent for centuries before any of the United States is ever established. And so if slaves came running from Protestant areas of the English enemy and said they wanted to be free, the Spaniards would free them. And so I worked on the first free black town in what is today the United States, Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose. And as a grad student, I had the luck to then go to Spain and do the research for this project, to be hired by the archaeologists. The Black Caucus of the Florida legislature paid for all of that. And here, many years later, we now have a National Historic Landmark registration, an Underground Railroad registration, a park at the site. It's a beautiful little museum at the site. The community plays the roles of all the people on the censuses that I dug out of those Spanish archives. And if you ever get to St. Augustine, Florida, please do go visit that. And so that was my background, and totally serendipitous in actually uncovering missing history and making it public through the schools and through museums and through public engagement. And that's what links me, I think, to this project with such affection, because I think we need to do the same thing here in Nashville. So some of the real connections in the history that I have worked on are basically, I'm going to give you two little sound bits here in this presentation. Andrew Jackson and the Hermitage at the head of the conversation, and Fort Negley at the end, and I hope I'll be able to draw some connections. But Andrew Jackson, you may not know, but maybe you do, invades Florida illegally in Spanish territory in 1818, and that's how I connected to him. And so when I moved to Nashville, I was able to pick up that thread here. I began a course for the Masters of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Vanderbilt, which I took my adult students, they were, to different sites like the Hermitage, like Fort Negley, and so on, and we would look at history and archaeology as new ways to look at African American history. And that was a long time ago, that was 2009, but it gave us a chance to start a new course in 2016, and I think Professor Dan Sharfstein spoke to you last year on this topic when we had just launched the course. But now it's for undergraduate students at Vanderbilt, basically doing the same kind of work, telling them that this is not just an antebellum Southern place. When you come to Nashville, often you see the beautiful mansions and you think that that's the storyline, but you know, we want to do it a little differently. So our arguments are, Nashville's not a typical antebellum place, as it's portrayed very often. Rather, in the 1780s, it becomes a frontier, an Indian frontier, into which many settlers come. The story of the white settlers is better known, but everybody should know that there were also free and enslaved African Americans in that earliest challenging period of the frontier when Indians were attacking and so on. So this is where I'm going to launch us today, in a rough frontier that is not only a white frontier and an Indian frontier, but a multicultural, multiracial frontier. And we'll start off there and see if it goes a little differently then. Okay. All right. So I have an experienced professor with me, thank goodness, at this thing. All right, well, if you look at these wonderful images, you'll see a very exciting place, and you may learn we have some wonderful textbooks that are written about Nashville, and that's where I dug it out. So I don't want to act as if I'm the primary historian of the frontier of Nashville. I'm certainly not. Anita Goodstein and many others have done this work. But my point being here that the signage on Fort Nashboro doesn't talk about the people that also helped establish this place and fought the Indians and died for it. And if you dig out some of those little missing shards of information from these textbooks, you'll find real individuals, free and enslaved, who participated in the first wars to take this space and hold it. So there's a few of them right there. Some of them free, some of them enslaved. Then, you know, we also get introduced very early to Andrew Jackson and the Hermitage. We see his rough beginnings, and I wrote a book called Atlantic Creoles, which is about Africans in the period of the Atlantic Revolutions. And Andrew Jackson's history in the American Revolution was rather tragic, and then he comes into the Nashville area and creates more tragedy to the south when he invades the Florida Seminole Indians and makes quite a bit of money that apparently helped him establish the larger Hermitage that you see today. One of the earliest invasions of the Anglos into Spanish Florida takes place in 1812. The War of 1812, you may remember from your textbooks, is when England invades us again and hopes to take back the United States. All that turmoil leads to turmoil on all these frontiers, and Georgian patriots, they called themselves, invaded Florida in 1812. My free black militiaman, Prince Whitten, who's another one of the chapters in that book, leads the military defense, which includes both Africans and Indians, in defeating the Georgian invasion of 1812. But always from the time of Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State in the 1790s, there was an ambition by the United States to expand southward, to remove Indians, to remove free blacks, to remove Spaniards, to clear the path, is the way Andrew Jackson thought about it, to get the whole place for the white settlers he wanted to move in. And so 1812 is one of the big first fights about this that involved basically a covert operation that Monroe approved and was funded. When it is defeated in 1812, they sort of go back home, go back northward, but years later, the U.S. government had to pay my free black militiamen for the damages to their burned farms and property. So 1812 is not a well-known war. If anybody studies it, they look to Canada. But the southern tier is pretty important, especially in this relationship to our fear of expansionism. So in the period after this, or even before this a little bit, Creek Indians had been coming across that southern border too and establishing what came to be known as Seminole villages all through Florida. And many runaway slaves didn't go to the Spanish cities, but instead went to live among the Seminole villages, establishing some of their own villages as well. And here are some of the most famous. Andrew Jackson didn't like it any better than Thomas Jefferson, that slaves continued to run southward and get free, either among the Spanish in the cities or among the Seminoles in the countryside. And so U.S. expansionism is going to eventually have to, as they saw it, drive these people out. And so we had the 1812 Patriot War, which was against this kind of multiracial system. Then you had the 1813-14 Creek or Red Stick Indian War, the same effort to defeat the Indians now in Alabama, that same southern tier. In 1815, the U.S. Navy goes up the Apalachicola River and bombs the Negro fort, they called it, that the British had established and left blacks and Indians in charge of in 1812. And the U.S. Navy, against territorial dominion of Spain, blows that fort up, takes a lot of those prisoners back too. People are making money on the people they're capturing and on the equipment they're capturing and on the animals they're capturing. So then we had the Creek War. And then in 1817, Andrew Jackson is made a new commander on the Flint River, and he launches what becomes the First Seminole War, which I covered in both my books. The first book was called Black Society in Spanish Florida, and the second book is that Atlantic Creoles book. So here are some of the villages and Andrew Jackson's path down across that international border illegally to invade and do that. So in April 16, 1818, Jackson's troops burned almost 400 black and Seminole homes at two villages that you can see on there, Bowlegs Town and Nero's Town on the Swanee River. They destroyed a large quantity of crops, food supplies. They took away big herds of cattle and horses that they carefully counted. And Jackson writes back from Bowlegs Town, "I've reached and destroyed this and the other town in the vicinity, and having captured the principal exciters of the war, I think I may safely say that the Indian War for the present is terminated." But of course it wasn't. The blacks and the Seminoles had been warned by their British allies from the Bahamas about this incoming attack, and a runaway slave from Spanish Florida, Nero, and his troops stand on the Swanee River. They had 300 men, and they let the women and children escape to safety. But on that account, at the Swanee, other people were captured by Andrew Jackson. Now here's where some of the serendipity comes in. My next door neighbor is Larry McKee, a very important archaeologist, who I knew from the world before, from Florida archaeology and museum work. And one day he brought me some letters that he wanted me to translate that were in Spanish. As it turned out, they were from a Spanish woman in St. Augustine whose slave had joined the War of 1812, and she was missing him, and darned if Andrew Jackson didn't capture him on the Swanee in a red coat, armed, and took him prisoner, and took him where? To the Hermitage. And I'm reading these letters, and this was, again, now here's, I think I was meant to come to Nashville, because this connects me again to this place. Andrew Jackson captured Fernando with weapon in hand, could have executed him on the spot. Instead, he claimed him as a slave, renamed him from Fernando, which is how I have him in the records, to Polydor, and took him back to Tennessee. And his former owner found out he was here. Wrights wants him returned. Andrew Jackson says, I can't. He's now married. He has children. But they write several letters back and forth, and Andrew Jackson finally paid $500 to Catarina Sartorius, the Spanish owner. And that was all those letters that Larry asked me to translate for him. Now, that's a pretty interesting story, I think, but even more interesting is she writes to Fernando in Spanish. So Fernando, like many of the Africans that I study in this frontier, were literate, could write, spoke several languages, European languages and Indian languages, and all of this is, again, my effort to change the narrative of African American history. Everybody is not a slave in a bedraggled situation in a cotton field somewhere in the Mid-South. There are many frontiers, and there are different kinds of frontiers. We have a river that goes from New Orleans to Canada. News travels up that. Politics travels up that. Languages travel up that. Culture travels up that. And if you've ever read that wonderful little book about Nashville, In Search of the Promised Land, that sort of set me on this trail of making new educational efforts as well. Sally Thomas's 3 boys, you probably know more about them. That is a wonderful story. One, she buys the freedom. One, she puts on a boat down to New Orleans and the captain frees him. And the third, she says, run for Canada. And he goes to Buxton on the other side of the Canadian border, gets educated, and is the first free black physician in the Union Army, which connects us then to Negley, okay? So all of these little trails of really unique individuals, but really are not so unique, I'm trying to argue. We need to put them all back in the landscape and get them back into the history and change that narrative a little bit. Because what do you think, when Polydor comes back to the Hermitage with Andrew Jackson, the minute he steps foot on that land, do you think those people don't know that story about how it was to run away from St. Augustine, Florida, how it was to run to the Seminole villages, how it was to get trained by the British troops, how it was to fight while the women went to freedom on the other side, and then how it was to get captured? They all know that. How it was that he could speak Spanish, and I guess he spoke Hichiti. How it was to know all these politics. This is a different narrative, and everybody on that place knew it, okay? So, Madame Sartorius writes to Fernando in Spanish to chastise him for his disloyalty. She called him an ingrate, and after reference to her own Christian charity and divine providence, she continued in a kinder vein. She said, I do not doubt that you have experienced many troubles and scares, and I hope that they have served as a lesson to you, and that from this day forward, you will seek liberty not in this miserable world, but in the next. God preserve your life many years, and I hope you will treat your new master with fidelity and constancy until his death. And so it would seem that Fernando was literate and told his story. So he'd had 6 years of freedom and war. Now he's a slave again. He's on the Hermitage this time, and he's now named Polydor. He has a wife and he has children. He's enslaved, but his literacy made him somewhat different. And if you look through the old Andrew Jackson papers, you can find that other white planters around here and businessmen around here knew Polydor. They would ask him for information about how things were out at the Hermitage. He had a status that others didn't have. One of the letters that I found, an acquaintance of Jackson says, I saw your servant Polydor yesterday, and he said servant. And I made particular inquiry how your black family were and how they conducted, meaning the other slaves on the plantation. And if he can be relied upon, everything goes well at your farm. So Polydor was in town, was speaking to people. His information was considered valid. He's a servant in their correspondence. And yet if you look at the descriptions in the materials at the Hermitage, he looks as if he's just a field slave with everybody else in those lists. So I wanted to show a few little things that Polydor and Fernando, Fernando, would have known about, would have seen. Black Seminole families, Black Seminole warriors who dealt with the American troops at different times. And I wanted to say that some of the black militiamen up here from Tennessee went down on those wars too. So we had free and enslaved men on both sides of the battle. Some of these men are in the Creek Wars with Andrew Jackson. Some are free, some are not. But again, all of these men, when they come back to Nashville, have seen the British troops, have talked to Spanish people, see Indians, see Africans, know the politics of the day. Do you think they don't talk about it when they come back to Nashville? One of my guys that I write about, Abraham, had run away from the Spanish in Pensacola, and he becomes also a leader in the Black Seminole villages and ends up taking a delegation to Washington, D.C. in the 1820s. They often served as linguists and translators in these military affairs and in the treaty making that followed. So I finally was able, when Larry was there, to put the story of Polydor into the narrative. I don't think he's featured as much anymore, so we'll have to fix that. We began to take our students also to these places and try to show the physical landscape, the cabins, and the archaeology that Larry did such a good job with, which is now on the website of Monticello, but not on our own. You have to go to the Monticello website to find all the archaeological reports on the Hermitage. But please do, because you'll find wonderful things that we haven't found in some of the other sites. We also take our students to train them as historians in all the wonderful archives of Nashville, and we're hoping that in this course they will develop new histories of these missing people and missing events, and that we'll rewrite that history through the students as well. These are some of the images of our students going to the different sites, and of course Fort Negley among them. So we've had the good fortune to have Dr. Bobby Lovett come with us on one of these visits. There he is, talking to our students. And the next time we go in April, one of my former students, I started African history classes at Vanderbilt, and one of my former students is a wonderful young woman named Eleanor Fleming, some of you may know, who went on to Meharry, got her PhD, and went on, she's a doctor at the CDC. Her ancestors helped build Fort Negley, and she will join us in our next tour. And then others of her ancestors worked on the WPA repair work, so she's got a long history. And so I'm so honored that you invited me here today, and I really am anxious to work with everybody to try to help Fort Negley have the same kind of appearance and support and designations that we did manage to get for my Fort Mose town. And we're on the way with all the wonderful people that have done the work before me. I'm just coming in late and anxious to help. And I guess so far my best effort has been to get it on the UNESCO Slave Route Project, which helped then stop the development of Gurr Stadium property. So that's step one. We've submitted all of that to UNESCO's Paris office. I'll be up in Monticello next month for a big museum conference with UNESCO, where again I'll be talking about these issues. I don't know how long it takes for them to go through their paperwork and to get these final designations done, but it's in the pipeline. It did the job of giving us time now to work. And so we want to do more. We're having all our students try to do some more. If I can be of any help to anybody in these efforts, Clay Bailey's an old friend from school, and Joel Dark's an old friend from school, and Krista I've known for a long while, so I'm offering any help I can be. I'm glad you all will let me help, and I look forward to what we can do in the future. And here's our UNESCO site, hopefully. Thank you.
another round of applause. Thank you. Before introducing our next presentation, I'd like to acknowledge a few people that are here. Earlier, you were introduced to the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at Tennessee State University. Her associate, Dr. Joel Dark, is here as well. Joel, can you stand? In keeping with the theme of this year's conference, A Panoramic View of Nashville, Tennessee, Dr. Dark has written an awesome profile on Edge Hill, and so we do thank him for that. I would also like to introduce the department chair of the Department of History at Tennessee State University, Dr. Abadi Oibadi. Would you stand? Dr. Oibadi, this is our chair. Our former department chair in history at Tennessee State University, Dr. Eric Schmeller. And on a side note, Dr. Schmeller and Dr. Andrew Patrick are working on a prelude to Tennessee History Day. And so they are looking for volunteers for the 23rd of this month. Young people across the state, middle school through high school, will come to this campus to give presentations on Tennessee history. And so if there's anyone interested in volunteering or judging on the 23rd of February, please be sure to see Dr. Schmeller. And then finally, I would like to acknowledge one of the former professors in history at Tennessee State University and a civil rights icon, Miss Elizabeth McClain. Where are you, Liz? She's here somewhere. Again, keeping with the theme, a panoramic view of Nashville, Tennessee, Dr. Ashley Bachman is a curator at the Hermitage, Andrew Jackson's estate. Her presentation this morning is The Power in Preservation, Reevaluating Activism Through Black Material Culture. Not only is she the curator at the Hermitage, she earned her PhD in public history from MTSU, and her master's is also in public history. This is her first time presenting at our conference. Will you please welcome Dr. Ashley Bachman.
Good morning. As you've heard, I am the curator at Andrew Jackson's Hermitage. But this morning I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into my current personal research. This presentation is stemmed from my dissertation, as well as my forthcoming book, which will be called Black Museology, Reevaluating African American Material Culture. Now, coming into this career, I've always been concerned about the process in which we do history and how our work impacts others. The first person that I always think about is my lovely daughter, who's actually here with me today. She's always been fascinated with how I do my headscarves, how I do my nails. She's always paying attention to what I'm doing. Now, in terms of my research, I've also been drawn to people and organizations throughout the Black freedom movement. And most of the prominent figures come to mind, including King, Rosa Parks, John Lewis. But further studies have made me focus on other individuals, including the Fannie Lou Hamers, the Septima Clarks, the Bayard Rustins, the Reverend Shuttleworth. And I came to the conclusion that in order to move the movement forward, we have to raise the hood and look at the less prominent individuals. Now, at my current position at the Hermitage, we always talk about the enslaved community, but when I give my tours, I like to talk about those hidden stories that always don't get the recognition that they deserve. So here we have Mr. Alfre Jackson. You'll hear about Alfred countless times on the tour, but what you don't hear is that Alfred was the first historic house interpreter at the Hermitage. This is huge, you guys. This is huge because you're hearing about, when individuals will take this tour, you would hear about the president, the 7th president of the United States, from a former enslaved person. That is absolutely huge because you're giving this individual the agency to craft the stories. It's showing the importance of oral history. So this leads me to think about the power of material culture and how it's represented into the narratives that we tell. Now, for many years, my fellow scholars have done research on Black club women, African American historical societies, and Negro exhibitions at World's Fairs. Now, the commonality between these individuals and events is that they collected and disseminated Black material culture for the purpose of adding value to Black history. And the reason this is important is because if you give tangible proof that Black folks have value, you cannot deny them full citizenship. Now, in terms of historiography, my research was really poured into several of these works, including Magen Kita's Reeling the Sphinx. If you haven't read this one, please put it on your bibliographies. Also, Sean Smith's American Archive and her other work, Photography of the Color Line. I've also looked at Mabel Wilson's Negro Building and the more recent work, Andrea Burns' Museum to Storefront. Now, what my research has added to this historiography is that I've linked the epistemological shifts in history with the collecting of Black materials. And the connection between the two are the libraries, archives, and museums of historically Black colleges and universities. Now, many of you think, well, we know these centers of institutions are important. We've attended them, we've studied in them. What's the big deal? The impacts of these are just really significant. It's because these institutions collected, preserved, and professionalized the process of artifact acquisitions, as well as use the materials to educate the public. That indirectly makes these spaces centers of activism, and the curators and archivists who work there some of the most invaluable figures of the Black freedom movement. Okay, they collected materials. We know that. But why is that important? It's important not because of what they collected, but how they collected the materials and how the objects were used. This is that methodology piece that most scholars have kind of dismissed or have not paid attention to. And that's what my research is going to bring into this conversation. And this was done well before the DuSable, before Dorothy Porter Wesley, before Marlon Springhorn Collection, and even before Schomburg at the New York Public Library. We have to go all the way back to Hampton Normal Agricultural Institute, or as we now know it as Hampton University. Now, in accordance to the mission set forth by the school's founder, General Samuel Armstrong, students at Hampton learn skills in technical training as educators, farmers, skilled workers, while learning self-awareness exercises to instill racial pride. Now, opening in 1905, Hampton Museum was created for the sole purpose of collecting material culture that aided in the self-pride within the races. This was the beginning of race-based collections to promote racial uplift. Now, you may be thinking, what is that connection between libraries and archives? Now, due to financial restraints, HBCUs were better equipped to house their materials in libraries, which were also to serve as community centers. And yes, Hampton had a curator, but because this material was housed in the library, the librarians were actually responsible for caring for the objects in the museum. So you have two very distinct fields in one space, and everyone has to interact and know the skills of both departments. And I found all this out by digging through the archives at Hampton University, fascinating materials that I found there. And it sort of led me down that, that research rabbit hole that you kind of get stuck in, but it was actually very rewarding because it allowed me to focus on Hampton University's library service program. This was the key to my research, was paying attention to how this program was set up. Now, while the school received government funding, it received private donations, including money from the Carnegie Foundation, the administration was actually responsible for hiring all of the faculty. Now, this is really important because even though the school is being funded by outside sources, you have the administration crafting how the students are being educated. The teachers were pulled from all places of the country who had very strong records of encouraging racial uplift in their curriculums. Now, two of the individuals that came up in my research first was Florence Curtis, who was the head of the library service program, and Cora Folsom, who was the first curator. Now, while these individuals are not African American, we do know that based on the records and the documentation at Hampton, that within their curriculum, within their assignments and literature that they were assigning to the students, they made sure they had literature and activities that talked about instilling racial pride, raising your self-esteem. That was a huge part of the curriculum. I also found an individual, her name is Alice Bacon, and I absolutely love looking through Alice Bacon's records. She was one of those individuals that really wanted to step outside of the box when it came to teaching students, and she did a lot of that through the Folklore Society. In the Folklore Society, which partnered with the school's editorial journal, the Southern Workman, and also the museum, she did this one activity that I thought was absolutely amazing, and I'm actually incorporating that in my current curriculum at the Museum Magnet School here in Nashville. She asked her students to join her on expedition trips to their hometowns. She took pictures of where they lived, where they grew up, their family members. And when doing this, she took those photographs back to the school and installed them in the museum as an exhibit. The purpose of this assignment was to show them that where you're from is important to who you are. This is groundbreaking. No one had ever told these students that you matter, that where you come from has power. And they're doing these with students of not just African American descent, but Native American descent as well. Now, along with their library training, you also have individuals being trained at the Smithsonian Institution. That's huge, guys. That's absolutely amazing. In the records, you see that the students at the museum as well as the library school would take annual trips to the Smithsonian where they learn collection management skills, including case selection, object handling, cataloging, and accessioning. Now you have Black librarians trained in an accredited program with federal training in collections management. That's pretty cool. When the school relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, the library service mission shifted just slightly. Now, the school was still committed to training students, but they also added an additional emphasis on professionalization, acquisition training, and educating the surrounding community. Students now receive special training in Negro special collections for work in college libraries, government libraries, as well as public libraries. And they were also taught how to aggressively seek out rare materials pertaining to Black life and culture. In this new mission statement, it said that it would provide the best library training possible for focusing on principles and techniques, proper standards for real library service, training used to connect students to larger areas of the world, foster an understanding that Blacks have a right to be a part of the accumulation and dissemination of knowledge. Now, in terms of educating the community, students were required to complete field work in the Black community to increase literacy rates and teach the masses how they can use literature to open new doors for them. Now, in some of the papers, excuse me, at the Atlanta Library, they have records showing that students, I have my daughter here, so you know, you have to bear with me. You have students that would hold entire classes, they would have entire semesters dedicated to going out to do field work. And in this field work, they would set up book fairs, they would set up exhibits, and all of the material would be from these rare materials in the Negro Special Collections. This is really important to me, is because currently, as a museum educator, sometimes we found out that our students don't have access. That's usually the biggest barrier for students, is having access to materials that scholars almost take for granted. But with these library programs, they are providing a service to the community, and this is what they're being trained to do. Their professors are telling them that not only do you have to educate yourselves, but you have to give that information back to your community, and that is required of you in all of your studies. Now, by the 1950s, you now have Black librarians who are now trained in accredited programs, who are receiving specialized training in the care and acquisition of rare materials, but also they are experienced in community programming. So essentially, HBCU library training programs created professionalized grassroots activists with formal training in collections management. Now, the gem of this research is that the students and most of the Black faculty were Black women. Beginning with the work of Black club women, the first library service program took this work a step further to legitimize their acquisition process, modify preservation methodology, and centralize African and African American history at the beginning of world civilization narratives. These women went on to not only found but lead national organizations, including the Negro Library Association and the National Association for the Study of Life and History. They served as editors, they served as board members, and within this group, you find some of the first African Americans that were nationally recognized as curators, including Dorothy Porter Wesley and Virginia Lacey Jones. But remember, they were classically trained as librarians. It was this work of the early HBCU libraries that inspired later influential figures during the modern civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, including Jim Bevel, Diane Nash, and Kwame Ture, AKA Stokely Carmichael. Their work to uplift the race through the acquisition and preservation of Black material culture is why representation matters in front of exhibits as well as behind them. Always remember that your voice is valuable and your presence has purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bachman. Let's give her another round of applause. I'm not sure if we're a little ahead of schedule here. Ms. Wynn, are we? Are we good? And finally, before our break, we're going to hear our third presentation for this morning, Finding Toussaint L'Ouverture in Tennessee. Again, the theme of this year's conference is a panoramic view of Nashville. The presentation will be made by Dr. Brandon R. Bird of Vanderbilt University. He specializes in African American history and the African diaspora. He's in the process of completing his first book, The Black Republic, African American Haiti, and the Rise of Radical Black Internationalism. Dr. Brandon R. Bird. Sure. You know, those things here. Do you have a flash drive? Yeah, I got a flash drive. It's okay, nice.
All right, thank you. All right. How y'all doing today? Good, good. First, let me thank Dr. Nguyen for inviting me to talk today. Very excited. The name of the talk is, y'all see on your program, Finding Toussaint L'Ouverture in Tennessee. To begin with, I wanted to give just a bit of background about this topic, how I came to it, just sort of frame what I'm sort of interested in today. So I'm new to Nashville, new to Tennessee really. Came here last year. Vanderbilt, made the decision to bring me on board. Grateful for that. And when I did, I was in the process of completing a manuscript on basically African Americans' ideas about Haiti, roughly over the 5 to 7 decades after the U.S. Civil War. So basically a period in which black people in the United States are thinking about what freedom means, right, and trying to achieve it, thinking about the avenues to really make freedom meaningful, and in doing so are thinking a lot about Haiti, which was the site, of course, of the only successful slave rebellion in global history, which was the lone black nation state in the Western Hemisphere, which was a model of black self-determination and black freedom, right? So they're thinking about Haiti a great deal in the process of thinking about what freedom means. Okay. And so when I arrived here, I'm writing that manuscript, and I find out that there is a Toussaint L'Ouverture cemetery right here in Franklin. I'm sure this is not news to anybody who's from here. It was news to me, though. So one of the first things I did was contact Rick Warwick, an archivist over in Williamson County, very nice guy, very helpful. And he very quickly shoots me an email back. It says, yeah, come on over, give you a tour of the cemetery. And also, and this is the point that brings me to our topic today, puts this note in his email. And I'm just gonna read it verbatim. It says, a dear friend of mine, Johnny Woolsworth Winstead, who lived to be 104, told me her great-grandmother, Mariah McGavick Odie Reddick, had Toussaint L'Ouverture's portrait on her wall. Okay. So, all right, another unexpected link. I want to pursue that. Okay. This was a potentially transformative piece of information. First, this could, and I didn't know Mariah Reddick at that time, right? This may be another name familiar to Tennesseans here. But immediately occurred that this could, at the very least, enhance our understanding of who this woman was, possibly reshape our understanding of who she was. That this tidbit, this piece of evidence from a family oral tradition could also point to the methods that we need to recover a fuller history of the life of freed women. Okay. It occurred that this piece of evidence could also advance our understanding of Black intellectual history, not only how to do Black intellectual history, history of ideas, but also what constituted, what these ideas were, particularly in this long post-emancipation era. And finally, it seemed to me that this piece of evidence could also raise important questions, point to important directions that we need to go in understanding the history of Black internationalism and Black women's internationalism, these global visions of Black freedom that Black people possessed in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. Okay. So essentially, this piece of evidence, it struck me as something that we need to make sense of, right? So really, what I want to do today is give perhaps some answers, we'll see, but more so just talk through the process of how I wanted to try to make sense of this one piece of evidence about a portrait of Toussaint Louverture on the wall of a formerly enslaved woman who became as we'll see, a property owner right here in Franklin. So the first step of that process was thinking about what the dominant archive, traditional sources, these written sources, whether they be plantation ledgers, wills, census records, written documents that you'll find at Tennessee State, or the Tennessee State Library and Archives, Vanderbilt's archives, right? What would they tell us, right? And they did tell us some things. They were limited, of course, limited in the ways that they are for many enslaved people, limited in the way even for freed people who still suffered some of the effects of what Saidiya Hartman calls the afterlives of slavery, right? Mariah Reddick, for instance, was non-literate. But again, they did tell us some things, these dominant archives. Mariah Reddick was born sometime in Mississippi, sometime around 1832. Both of her parents were enslaved. She was moved into the plantation that the man who owned her purchased in 1845 in Louisiana. She was not there for long. In 1848, she was given as a gift around Christmas time. It was a gift to the daughter of the man who owned her when she got married. Okay. An unfortunate occurrence, a tragic occurrence, a real marker of the type of exploitation that enslaved people faced, but as Dana Ramey Berry, historian, tells us, a not uncommon experience. Enslaved people were gifted, they were raffled, all the time in the antebellum era. And that's the type of exploitation that Mariah Reddick faced. So when she was gifted as a wedding present, she was then taken to Tennessee, where the husband of the woman who now owns her owned the Carnton plantation out here in Franklin. Mariah Reddick was then very quickly married, forced to marry a man who was about 14 years her senior. She went on to have 8 children with him. I'm blanking on how many lived to adulthood off the top of my head right now. It's not all of them. And she was pregnant at the time of the Civil War. At that time, she was moved, as most enslaved people were at the Carnton plantation, from that plantation to Montgomery, Alabama. Right? Frequently you'll hear, if if you go to Carnton, they'll tell you stories about, and these are typical stories, they're the same thing at the Hermitage, at most plantations, about the hiding of silver and the hiding of valuables, right? Of course, the most valuable property were the enslaved people themselves. And plantation owners did everything in their power to try to protect them. Most of the time, these efforts are futile, right? Enslaved people flee to Union lines. They take the opportunity of the Civil War to seize freedom. But the point being that lost in those romanticized stories of the lost cause are the actual valuable property that was there was an attempt to protect, right? In 1865, by that time, Mariah Reddick's first husband, the one she'd been compelled to marry, passed away. And she marries a second husband, one who, by all accounts, she very much loved, very much had a sound relationship with. She would have another child with him. And then in Freedom, the sources in the Dominant Archive tell us that she did many things that other freed women did, right? For one, she used the real skills that she had to her advantage. She was a midwife in Franklin, one that all classes came to rely upon for her real medical knowledge, right? Other records show that she gave depositions after the Franklin riot, essentially a vigilantism on the parts of conservatives who fired upon a march of both white and black Republicans in Franklin. She gives a deposition testifying to the violent actions of conservatives. She eventually comes to own her own home. And again, it becomes her home. Her husband deeds her that property around 1906, right? So in short, the Dominant Archive tells us that Mariah Reddick was in many ways not exceptional, okay? Again, she experienced many of the unfreedoms that other women like her did. She's literally gifted, right? She is experiencing this double burden of sexism and racism. She is forced into her first marriage. But the Dominant Archive also tells the ways she pushes back against those unfreedoms, particularly after emancipation. She testifies before tribunals in the context of the Franklin riot. She teaches Bible classes, local Bible classes. She moves literally out of the house of bondage, right, becomes a property owner. So it tells us all these things. But of course, to reiterate this point, there are limitations to what we can glean from this Dominant Archives, certainly for her life before emancipation and even after emancipation. Okay. So to return to this portrait of Toussaint, this one piece of evidence has the potential to fill in some of these silences in the Dominant Archive, right? It has the potential to tell us how not only her lived experience, but also the ideas that she produced from that lived experience, okay? To glean those ideas, though, we have to answer some other questions, okay? The first one would be, of course, why Toussaint Louverture? Okay. One answer to that is the long-standing interest in Haiti and the Haitian Revolution amongst African Americans, right? Dating back really to the end of the Haitian Revolution in 1804, black people in the United States, as you might surmise, took a great deal of interest and assigned a great deal of meaning to the successful slave rebellion and then to the ascent of a black nation state, to a beacon of black independence, right? And we should point out that it is highly likely that Mariah Reddick knew about hating the Haitian Revolution long before she obtained legal freedom. As Booker T. Washington wrote in his biography of Frederick Douglass, every enslaved, and this is a rough paraphrase, every enslaved person, regardless of whether they knew anything else beyond the plantation, knew about the Haitian Revolution. Okay? It was passed through gossip, gossip that would be particularly robust in a small town like Franklin, where whether enslaved people worked in the household, whether they worked in a tannery, whether they worked in these other industries, that they were moving about this town and sharing these ideas, whether they be about the Haitian Revolution, whether they be gossip about the white folk in town, that they were sharing these ideas during the hours off work that they were able to carve out for themselves. So she knew about it, right? The more immediate reason would be that these images of Toussaint Louverture were sold, and they were rather ubiquitous after emancipation. We have two images here. This is from the Nashville Globe, this sale. This is very difficult to see, but this is from the Indianapolis Freeman. Along this long list of names here, here it is. Toussaint Louverture's name is right here. Of course, they feature Frederick Douglass most prominently. We have Toussaint here. Okay. So they're ubiquitous. They're being sold. Probably before the 1890s, but the earliest instances I've seen of these sales in black newspapers from the 1890s. There were individual sellers. There were also black businesses selling. They were selling to emerging black businesses that came about in this post-emancipation era, to black schools, to other black businesses, to black homes. So in a way, they become not only a sort of reinforcing this idea of Toussaint Louverture as this model of black freedom, right, linking him to that, but they also become linked into these ideas about racial uplift and ascending status, right? That they become ways to designate an aspirational class or a black middle class, to really mark these institutions as being that, as sort of sites where black people are emerging from slavery to a very new social and economic status, right? So they're ubiquitous, and there are ideas that sellers are trying to attach to them, but then there are also ideas that purchasers, consumers, are then going to attach to these portraits as well. Right? So what ideas then would Mariah Reddick attach to this, right? For one, it's possible that she attached ideas of black masculinity and even militant resistance to racial oppression to these to this portrait, right? By the time she would have put this up in her household, and I should clarify here that Winstead is born about 1896, I believe. So by the time she is remembering this portrait in Mariah Reddick's home, her great-grandmother's home, this is about the time of the Springfield riot, right? This massive, what becomes known as a race riot, essentially one of the many racial pogroms attempted by, in this case, white Midwesterners to drive black people from their community. We see Toussaint Louverture and other Haitian revolutionaries being seen as a model of resistance to that type of violence, right? As a model of militant resistance to a new order of Jim Crow, real racial apartheid, right? So it's possible that Mariah Reddick attaches those ideas to Toussaint Louverture. It's possible that she, of course, attaches ideas about emancipation, black freedom to it. right? These long-standing ideas. It's possible that she attaches ideas about racial uplift, both in the sense of emergence from slavery to freedom, but also racial uplift in the sense of racial leadership, this idea that Black leaders having a responsibility for the moral and material elevation of the Black masses. Toussaint, by this era, stood in for this idea of sound racial leadership. It's possible that Mariah Reddick attached ideas about consumption, purchasing power, middle-class identity to this portrait, right? Again, we can note how these pictures were most often advertised, right, to these other emerging Black institutions. But I think the most likely idea that she attached to it is one of Black independence, self-determination, and in particular, Black spatial independence and self-determination. Okay, so let me try to explain that. So Mariah Reddick, both certainly in slavery in Franklin and then even in freedom, would experience a real sort of forced intimacy with white Tennesseans, white Franklinites, right? That was the nature of small-town slavery in a place like Franklin, where there was very little separation. Okay. So to have not only her own space, to have her own home, but then to designate that as her own space, as her own home, in probably many different ways. But with this portrait of Toussaint Louverture, this beacon, this idol of Black freedom, I think is a real expression about what having that space, that autonomy would really mean to her. Now, the reason why I find that probably one of the more likely ideas attached to it comes from where we sort of began, right? The Toussaint Louverture Cemetery. When Mariah Reddick passes away in 1912, she chooses to be buried there in the cemetery that Black people in Franklin, they gain the right to this property in 1884, and she chooses to be married there with her second husband, okay? And of course, that cemetery reinforces that idea, that importance of Black spatial independence, okay? So, in somewhat, what I think this piece of evidence helps us do, right? Centering this piece of evidence that comes to us through oral tradition, that comes to us through a real Black women's archive, right? Not only produced by Mariah Reddick, but then told to us by her great-grandmother, our great-granddaughter, right? It challenges and reframes images of Mariah Reddick, right? Who, this is the most ubiquitous image of her. This is at Carton, right, where she is, and this is after emancipation, but she's still performing this sort of role of servitude, right? So it challenges that image for sure, repositioning her as this independent homeowner with a portrait of Toussaint, right? It even reshapes our understanding of how she is even pictured in the archive after emancipation, even in some documents in which we see her voice coming through in clearer ways, right? Even there, she's positioned, and this is her second husband, Boland Reddick, in relationship to Black men, to white Franklinites. She's positioned in sort of secondary roles, right? Okay. So this allows us to see her front and center, right? Her own voice, her own ideas. So just the point that I'll end on here is that positioning this piece of evidence front and center, bringing her to the forefront as a producer of ideas, also brings to the forefront the international nature of these ideas, right? In this post-emancipation era, those ideas are ubiquitous, these international ideas, right? That freed people were certainly not parochial, that they embraced a vision of freedom that was global in nature, and they saw freedom as having global implications too. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Flash.
All right, good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are these yours?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, let's give Dr. Bird another round of applause. We are on schedule. At this time, we will take a break, and I have been asked to ask this morning's presenters if they would hang around for a photo op. We also ask that if you go into the atrium, I think we have a 20-minute break, and then we will come back. We will hear some poetry and the spoken word, and then we will continue on with our program. Thank you. Welcome everyone back from our first break. At this time, we will be entertained with a poetry group. But before I introduce them, I'd like to recognize some other individuals. Would the veterans of the Civil Rights Movement please stand? Those of you who are here, some that I know, I didn't see Kwame Lillard stand, so I'm guessing he's, I don't see good, Kwame. I see you now, okay. Also, would the staff of the library at Fisk University please stand and be recognized? This morning we had 3 wonderful oral presentations highlighting again that panoramic view of Nashville, Tennessee. Our first entertainment of the day will be the spoken word. Very cultural. The group who will be presenting, the Southern Word, they offer creative solutions for youth to build literacy and presentation skills, something that all of us could probably use a little of. They're committed to providing youth with as many opportunities as possible through writing, public presentations, performances, and music. Would you please welcome the Southern Word? Do we need to bring the lights down? Do you need to bring the lights down? Could we bring the lights down just a little while they're on stage, please? Is that possible? Thank you.
My little sister came home from school the other day crying because she got in trouble during class. When joking around with some of her classmates, she told a black boy he looks like a monkey. She's 7 years old. My whole family is white.
If a slave is hung from a tree and no one is there to document the history, will the truth be written? Will his obituary be printed in fact, so would a bunch of middle school textbooks be published?
The issue was taken care of, and she knows now why she can't say things like that, but I saw my parents' heart sink.
Will the ink coated in lies be shoved down the throats of their GPAs?
The school she goes to is comprised almost entirely of white kids.
Will you call it the truth?
White counselors, white teachers.
Will you call out the blasphemy by its name?
White lunch cooks, white nurses.
Or will you read them one chapter once a year, every other semester?
My parents are liberal and accepting in ways I can never thank them enough for. They've grown an environment in our home that left discussion open, that let me and my siblings know we'd be loved and supported no matter what, that taught us to form our own opinions and make our own beliefs and hold true to them. But there, I think, might be the problem.
If a boy who commits no crime was to stop for snacks, will he make it home safe? Will he have Skittles in Arizona for dinner, or will the state of Florida find no conviction in his murder?
I was present for the conversation when my mother sat my sister down and explained what exactly the word racism meant, what was wrong with what she had said, why it was inappropriate. But I can't remember a time when we went out of our way to make her believe that prior to that day.
Will the uprisings disturb you? Will you use your white privilege to justify the injustice? Will you pretend it didn't happen?
Well, we weren't making an effort to tell her she was at her white school, surrounded by kids she noticed all looked like her, blonde and blue-eyed, some regurgitating the words of their parents as the election flew by.
Will you stand on the sidelines of the racist? Will you use the crowd as motivation to keep doing the wrong you know is wrong? Which side of the lunch counter are you on? Are you even aware there is a counter?
My family wanted to leave her alone to let her form her own opinions. We didn't realize that people had already formed them for her.
If a monument to civil rights is built within walking distance of the new downtown, will you kick out those who are still fighting for their zip codes? Who keeps their home? Where will they go?
I wonder if things would have been different if we'd been louder. If we'd only peeled our tongues from the roof of our guilty mouths and forced our lips to work. If we didn't bury our heads halfway in the sand, close enough to hear the noise, but far enough down to pretend we aren't the problem. If we weren't so scared of what we could say wrong that we chose to say nothing at all. There's no way to fix a problem with a wrench whose jaws you won't adjust for fear of its teeth. There's no way to teach a child through silence.
And tomorrow, if you guys would please join us at the Blacklift Music and Poetry Festival, that'd be awesome. Oh, there's flyers on the counter.
And please give them another round of applause. It's wonderful to have everyone here today celebrating this 37th local conference on African American history and culture and art in Nashville, Tennessee. And that was a wonderful example of the culture, the rich culture that we so much celebrate here in my Nashville, Tennessee. I'm an old Nashvilleian. I still see Nashville as the Athens of the South, and that's what has been seen here today. For 37 years now, 38 years ago, Linda Wynn and Bobby Lovett and Lois McDougall and Maydeen Eberling sat in a small conference room at Tennessee State and said, Nashville's the kind of place where we can bring people together who will appreciate the history of African Americans. As you've seen this morning, it's a very diverse history. It's not the old South, it's not the new South, it's the up South, it's the Nashville South. And we tell our story better, I think, than anyone else here in Nashville, Tennessee. And that's the reason for 37 years this conference has maintained its following and its fellowship. I'm not going to ask all of my friends to stand because I like to think that everyone in here is a friend of mine. I certainly feel like that we're a friend of yours by coming together. But I will take one personal liberty. You can do that when you have the microphone. And that's to present one that's so dear, that's been with us for 37 years. And we can look up, and I can tell when she kind of drops her head or when she kind of shakes her head. And if this conference had a mother, it would be Linda Wynn's mother, Mrs. Frances Thompson. Ms. Thompson, wave at me. Stand up. Thank you for coming. Now, we started in a small auditorium over on the other side, hoping we could fill it up. And when we began this conference, if you read the information you got, Linda Wynn did most of the writing. Bobby Lovett presented most of the papers, and they let me preside most of the time. But over the years, I was reminded this morning when I was a young, aspiring historian with black hair, what it was like to be on a conference like this when I was doing presentations, and a young scholar who just was here from Vanderbilt who was making, I think, a marvelous presentation. I always wondered, why is the Toussaint Louverture Cemetery in Franklin, Tennessee? I think I'm not the only one that may have been naive to the point why, but this morning that was so well addressed. And he was moving along, and I was so into it. And I said to Linda, I said, by now, Miss McDougal would be moving on me because I wouldn't even. She said, look at that, there goes Pam. But that's what happens here. And that's what happens at a place and time like this. We've been fortunate here in Nashville. This conference is co-presented by the Metropolitan Historical Commission and the City of Nashville and Tennessee State University. And this morning I'm going to be bold enough to say there are a few instances where you find coming together scholars from around this city and around the state, members of the Historical Society, both commissions, Metro and state, and we sit in this place and we celebrate our history. So there's much to be said. We've been constantly supported by the city of Nashville. Each of the mayors of Nashville has supported the conference and visited the conference. And this morning, that has not changed. The mayor of Nashville joins us. It's my pleasure to present Megan Barry. House informed. If not, I met her when she was in the 3rd grade and I was in the 4th grade. And ever since then, she's been doing just what she did just now. Reverend, let me tell you something. I was informed the mayor will join us at approximately 11:30. Also, I think this is special and special place in this downtown campus. And there's such a legacy of this downtown campus, the Avon in Williams campus, why the building was built, who it was built for, and what it's become. But in the center of downtown Nashville, Tennessee State University has allowed and supported this conference. And today, Dr. Johnson and her predecessor, and my good friend, Dr. Bobby Lovett, as deans of the School of Social Sciences here at Tennessee State, supported, but each of the presidents and the administration supported us. And this morning, we will be welcomed by Dr. Alicia Mosley, who is the interim vice president for academic affairs, representing President Glover. Dr. Mosley? Don't y'all do this to me again. Linda? I have 5 minutes. Well, I've never had any problem talking, but I don't do well extemporaneously. That's without notes. But this morning we will welcome those. Let me just say a word about the aim of the conference. This morning I think we've heard as wonderful presentations, as professional, really in the area of preservation as you find at any conference anywhere in this country, any organization. But also a focus, and the young people with the spoken word, it also highlights the culture. Now, the other aspect of that I hope you have addressed or you will address will be art. From the very beginning, on the planning committee was Professor Viola Woods from the Art Department of Tennessee State. followed by the distinguished artist, Professor Gregory Ridley, advised by Professor Ted Jones and Professors Michael McBride. And today, the curatorial part, the curation of the exhibition for the conference is by Professor Jamal Sheets from the Gallery at Fisk. Stand up, Jamal. Now, Jamal, come down and tell us the focus of what's in the... He's going to love this. See what you can do with your former students so you can... But welcome. Tell us what's out in the foyer for us this year.
Thank you. What I really wanted to do was hold my head down, but I felt if I held my head down, he would call on me. And so I was looking at him, and it ended up calling on me anyway. But the exhibition upstairs, this year we decided to go with student works, and the focus is social justice and activism. And so we decided to look at students from Fisk, but also TSU. And so we have Amber Gonzalez, who's up, her work is on the far left side. Beautiful piece for those that have not seen it. I highly recommend that you all go look at it. She was inspired by the eclipse that happened in August. And then she went on to do research, and she heard a professor. I'm not sure who that professor was, but I think that professor's in this classroom, I mean, not in this classroom, but in the auditorium, where they talked about the eclipse and Nat Turner's revolt. And that she was inspired because Nat Turner felt like it was a sign from God. And so in response, she did that piece. The next piece over is by Jade Rohn, also a Fisk student, followed by Maya Alston, who's a recent alum, and if you go around, there's two students from Tennessee State. Yeah, so that's it. So I highly recommend that you all come and look at the student works that are outside. If you have any questions, either I or Mike can talk to you all about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just make notice here, or mention at this point in time, on the last Thursday of the month, I believe it's the 22nd, at Fisk University, we will celebrate our annual Pearson Lecture Series. For 20 years, we celebrate African American History Month with the public invited to a lecture named in honor of the late Dr. William Pearson. He believed that we should emphasize primary research on Fisk. He pointed out that scholars from around the country come to Fisk and do their research, and that those of us associated with the institution should carry on that research. This year, there'll be a very, I think, interesting presentation by Dr. Kenneth Head. Dr. Kenneth Head was a former football player from Fisk. He was a Bulldog when I was there. He was one of my classmates. He's later went on to serve as athletic director and is retired. But he will do a presentation on the history of sports and athletics at Fisk. It's a topic I find intriguing. I think you will find intriguing. There will also be performances by the Fisk University Chorus and the Jazz Ensemble. 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 22nd, in the Appleton Room of Historic Jubilee Hall at Fisk. And we would very much, it's open to the public, we'd very much like to have all of you come. I hope you'll mark your calendars for the first week in April. The first week in April, we will celebrate a Spring Arts Festival at Fisk, a tradition. And this year, the focus of the Spring Arts Festival will be the inauguration of the 16th president of Fisk, Dr. Kevin Rohn Sr. There are any number of events, theatrical productions. We're going to produce The Wiz in dinner theater form. Of course, concerts by the Fisk Jubilee Singers. I'm not going to call Professor Sheets up again, but many activities in the gallery, please. And on the 4th, at approximately 5 o'clock, there will be a remembrance and celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, sponsored by President Rohn, his inaugural lecture series, because on that day was the day of the assassination of Dr. King. So please follow the newspapers. And on the 5th, his inauguration will take place at 1 o'clock in the Fisk Memorial Chapel. Are any of our previously announced guests, have they arrived at this point in time? think I see the mayor. Mayor Barry. Madam Mayor, Barry, in the words of come on down. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't sure. So, how is everybody today? It's a beautiful sunny day, and I'm so glad that you guys are here, and I'm so glad I get to be with you. I know that we have some folks here who are on the Historical Commission. If you're a Historical Commissioner, will you raise your hand so we can just thank you? Thank you. I know that President Glover was going to be here, and I just want to take a quick moment and say thank you to TSU and you all for hosting. This is great. We've got Tim Walker here who works with the Historical Commission, and also many others who are joining us today. I want to give a quick shout out as well to Carol Busey. She is our historian. Where's Carol? There she is. And to Dr. Revis Mitchell, Linda Wynn, and everyone else from Fisk who worked with TSU and the Historical Commission to get all the sponsors together to make this happen. So a round of applause for them too. So let me take a quick moment and talk about what is the favorite topic right now across Nashville, and that's transit. I want to give a shout out. I want to shout out to the Metro Council members who are here who made it possible to put this on the ballot for the May 1st referendum. I think it's been an extraordinary commitment from our community to come together and to craft a plan and then to get the Metro Council to say, yes, we believe that voters need to vote on this. And so thank you to the Metro Council members who are here who've also made that happen. If you think about transit and you think about what this is going to do, I think we can look at this through the lens of history. And I think we can look at the history of it right here in Nashville and how traffic and transit has impacted our communities. And I want to go back and look at when I-40 and I-65 ran through North Nashville 50 years ago and bifurcated that neighborhood from the rest of our city. That was hugely impactful. And it was a terrible moral failure. And what it did was fragment a community, and the cost of that have been really high. So part of this plan, when we were looking at it, gave us an opportunity to make a little amends on that. Because originally, when this transit plan was proposed, there were only 4 light rail lines. And when this was brought into my office with those 4 light rail lines, I said there needs to be 5. There needs to be 5. So we've added the Northwest Corridor light rail line because it is so important to folks in North Nashville to have that high capacity transit, to have the opportunities that transit is going to bring, and to provide that connectivity back. Because what that line is going to do is it's going to go downtown from Charlotte, it's going to go up Spruce Street to 20th, it's going to take the existing freight tracks right now, and it's going to extend north of TSU at Buchanan Street and Ed Temple Boulevard. Now, when you think about that, that means that light rail is going to be accessible, and it's going to be on its own lane, so there's not going to have the congestion. And when we looked at the city's Northwest Corridor study, they identified Ed Temple Boulevard, Hyman Street, and Fisk-Meharry as the best places for train stations. Now we're going to get to have that chance. And because we're already going to be able to use the Nashville and Western Railway track that already exists, we're not going to have to go out and acquire property. We're going to be able to do that on that existing line. Because ultimately, transit is about equity. It's about making sure that you connect people to where they need to go and what they need for their lives. Be it a job, be it education, be it healthcare, whatever it is that they need. And by doing that, we're going to be able to create frequent transit networks where we have our 10 busiest bus routes. And our 10 busiest bus routes right now include Bordeaux and the Charlotte routes, as well as our free Music City circuit that goes down Jefferson Street, all the way to TSU, and comes back downtown. That was one of the things that we included in the budget last year as well. Many of you had seen that green circulator, and that green circulator, which is free, you can hop on and hop off, stopped at the farmer's market. And so part of our budget considerations last year and our commitment to connection, we said we're going to make the opportunity for that to go down Jefferson so that we can connect TSU and Fisk and all the people who live on that Jefferson Street corridor to free transit to get around downtown. And when this passes, it means that by fall, our buses are actually going to run 20 hours a day, Monday through Saturday, and 16 hours a day on Sunday. Right now, the thing that I hear the most from folks is I can't take the bus because it doesn't start early enough and it doesn't go late enough. You've got to have a transit system that's working all the time. And buses are the backbone of any good system. Also, by fall of 2019, the same 10 routes that will have service that has the peak service now are going to start coming every 15 minutes. Because I hear this too. I see all these empty buses. Why are we investing in buses? You don't see people on buses if it's not convenient, if it's not frequent, if it doesn't go the hours that you need it to go. And that's part of this plan. So again, we're going to make it easier. And it's not just, though, about the buses. It's not just about the light rail. There's also a huge piece of this that's about safety and pedestrian safety and creating more sidewalks and making sure that we have those safe street crossings. Right now, we have lots of what we call mega blocks throughout our community, where in order for you to cross the street, you have to walk a long way before you can get to a crosswalk. So people don't wait. They run across, and that creates pedestrian fatalities. So we're working on that too. And just in general, it's going to make it easier for you to get around. And as we think about mobility and we think about other pieces of this, it's also going to improve our Access Ride. Access Ride is used mostly by folks who have disabilities or who are elderly to get around. And helping them make those connections so that they can stay active is critical. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of riding on an Access Ride with Mrs. Minerva Ingram. And she and I got on her Access Ride in Bordeaux, and it took her over to 50 Forward, where she goes 4 times a week to connect with her community, to connect with people who like to crochet and knit and do crafts, and it keeps her vibrant. And as Minerva and I were talking, and we were talking about her trajectory for transit, she talked about the fact that as somebody who had worked at Vanderbilt in childcare, that she had used the bus as her primary way to get around. And she'd relied on that. And when her mobility made it harder for her to get to a bus stop, the ability to have Access Ride come to her house, pick her up, and take her to where she needed to go was critical for not only her social interaction, but also her wellness, because it takes her to her doctors as well. The other thing about talking with Mrs. Ingram as we were riding was a wonderful story as we began to connect, where she talked and said that she had been at Vanderbilt Child Care. And so we both started looking at each other, looking a little harder. And finally she looked at me and she said, yeah, she said, I had your son. He was a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old when he was at Vanderbilt in my class. And then she went on to talk about remembering his 2nd birthday. And that was really special. And it reminded me that transit connects us in all kinds of ways. And that was a really nice thing. Now, there's so much of this plan that is also out there about Clarksville Pike, Dickerson Pike, and two of our city's busiest rapid bus corridors are going to have that opportunity to have busy thoroughfares and high-capacity buses. And Trinity Lane is going to get a new crosstown bus route that is going to connect neighborhoods and offer transfer stops to other rapid bus lines on both Clarksville and Dickerson Pikes. As I said before, this is really simple. It's about access, and it's about mobility. And it's about how we want Nashville to go forward. So I recognize that there's lots of other conversations that have to happen around this. And I know that as we have the weeks and months ahead, my hope is that you will get your questions asked and answered so that you will have the confidence on May 1st, or early voting starts April 11th, to push the button and be for this plan, because it's really, really critical. I know that there's lots to talk about here, and I think that one of the other pieces I want to highlight is just, because this is a historical meeting, is a couple of other things that have happened recently. And I want to take a moment and talk specifically about Fort Negley, because I think that that has been on the minds of folks recently. You know, Fort Negley, when we think about that, we looked at not the totality of that site, we just looked at one piece of it. We saw a crumbling Greer Stadium that needed to be knocked down and redeveloped. But with lots of voices in the community coming forward and saying, you know, there's a bigger piece here that we need to think about. That was really important. And questions started to come up about what might be at that Greer Stadium site, what might be sacred and need of protection. So before we moved forward, we got an archaeology report, and we said we need help in informing our decision about how we're going to move forward. And when we knew that this was a good plan, we didn't want to make sure, we wanted to make sure that anything that we did was also incredibly respectful. So we've actually had a really good conversation. We've been able to rethink, we've been able to revisit, and we've been able to say, we need to recognize the history here that has happened to make sure that the African Americans who gave their lives, who are buried there, can be remembered and celebrated and recognized. And that is all part of the process that Friends of Fort Negley have started. So my hope is that if you are not part of that, please become part of that so that you can lend your voices to that. And I think I have two people here who are with me today, Aaron Haffenshield and Ashford Hughes. I think they're back there. They are my transit experts. They are also my DBE experts, my workforce development experts. One of the things that we did when we came into Metro office was to make a commitment to double down on DBE participation. For this transit plan, our commitment is 30%. And Ashford can speak more specifically about that and why that's important. Because it is important. We need to make sure that everybody in the community is getting the benefit not just of the ridership, but also of the amazing jobs that will be created with this. So Ashford's going to stick around, and Aaron is going to stick around to talk specifically about transit. I've been told that I can take a few questions, so if anybody has a specific question for me, I'm happy to take it. Good. Thank you all for having me be here today. I'm going to stick around if anybody does have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You may be interested, just last week I sat with President Rohn and several other members of the administration. We are planning a public forum at Fisk University to discuss transit Nashville. I hope you'll watch your calendars. It'll be in mid-March. It'll be open to the public. And we think we found a way to also make sure that our students show up, because that's also going to be the evening that we announce the candidates for student government that evening. So we'll have a mixed media event. I can't ever resist history. Madam Mayor, you might also be interested. Several mayors who've occupied this podium sort of jumping off of their political careers. One went on to be governor, and he wants to be senator, and another one wants to be governor now. So, you know, don't take this podium lightly. Is Dr. Alicia Mosley with us now? Dr. Mosley? Well, I've had a little experience in doing this at other places. Dr. Johnson, would you like to? Well, on behalf of Dr. Glenda Baskin Glover, the president of Tennessee State University, wrong place, we want to express our appreciation for being here. We thank her. Madam Pam, Madam Linda, is anything else before we announce anything else? Come up forward. All right. I'm training. Come. Yeah. You can pull me, of course. I'm ready to. Thank you.
Because Dr. Mitchell has given us an update on the calendar at Fisk University for the next 2 months, there are some events that are happening at Tennessee State University also that I'd like to make mention of. Again, Drs. Eric Schmeller and Andrew Patrick are offering a prelude to Tennessee history on the 23rd of this month on this campus. Volunteers are needed as well as judges. April the 5th and 6th, also on this campus, the 6th Annual African Conference will be held. There are speakers and presentations, not just from here or locally, but also from different African nations. And the organizers of that conference are Dr. Oibadi, the department chair of history at Tennessee State University, and Dr. Bikili, who is a geographer. Those are the two events on my mind. Did I forget anyone? One last thing, I was asked to acknowledge the young ladies and men who are working the Welcome Center. I don't know if they've come into the hall yet, but we do want to acknowledge them for their hard work in planning, preparing, and putting on this event for us. Yes. I am now going to give the mic back to Dr. Mitchell while we await the arrival of Dr. Mosley, after which we will go to lunch.
Thank you, Professor Bobo. Public call for papers. If there are topics of interest or individuals who wish to present at the conference and become research, I hope you will look at the information provided with contact with the Metro Historical Commission and make contact with some of us. When we began this conference, we had hoped that it would be both lay and professional historians. This morning, it seems like we're heavily credentialed, and that's wonderful. That's good. But this is Nashville's conference. If there's a topic that you're burning about or research, and we're always soliciting, probably we should look for the 2020 conference because of Professor Wynn's work, we just about had the agenda set for next year's conference. But if anyone is interested in presenting a paper at that time, something else we never do, but we have a few minutes. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Any questions? Hands? Yes, over here.
I have year asked a question on the survey about being able to get a copy of what we have here. Is it possible, will we ever have that available to purchase?
Like to feel it?
Yeah.
Please, I think if you contact the Metropolitan National Historical Commission, Tim Walker's here. If you contact Metro Historical, they can direct you to that. Also, our records and much of our information can be found as a part of the collections in the Tennessee State University Library. So, in both of those fields. Any other questions? Well, I think I'm going to make myself, can I? Announce something? All right, yes.
I just want to ask, you said you're recording this. Is it going to be on the Metro channel?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it will be. Yes, it will be.
She's supposed to be here in 15. She's supposed to be here in
Rob, do you think we should have lunch and let her work on after lunch? Well, I'm again going to take the prerogative of the chair unless I'm informed otherwise.
We're trying to figure out. She's supposed to be here.
Two places. You can check at Tennessee State University's library on the main campus, and you can check with the Metro online through the Metro Historical Commission, TSU online, and Metro. Well, I've been a classroom teacher for years, and I know how to raise your ratings if you teach at 11 o'clock. Please enjoy yourself. Lunch is served.
Start the afternoon portion of this program. I hope that all of you enjoyed your lunch, your naps, and however you spent the past hour and a half. It's usually this time of the program that I pass the torch to my former colleague, Gloria McKissick. Gloria has over 47 years in public education, and without further ado, I wish all of you well until this time next year. I'd like to introduce Gloria McKissick.
Thank you, Professor Bobo. Welcome to the second session of the 37 years that we have presented this conference, and thank you for coming and being supporters. And all of you are supporters, but I do want you to pay attention to look at the back of your program and to recognize some of the people who have been financial supporters that have made this possible, this program today. And just consider just how much you were able to get in return for your registration. A wonderful lunch presented by Airmark Food Service, They always do a wonderful job of having lunch for us. You've had entertainment, you had intellectual stimulation, and a chance to really, network with others. And that's one thing about this conference. It's so wonderful to see so many faces that we see year after year, and then the number of new faces. And I could feel today, and I asked some other people, did they feel the way I did, the energy that was in the room? Young people have helped to grace this conference. Some of them probably had to return to classes. We did a lot of recognizing of people this morning, but I certainly, as an educator, like to recognize the youth. So if you're a student, would you please just stand so we could recognize the youth that are still here with us today? Well, we have some other people we're going to recognize, but I need to, at this time, turn the stage over to Dr. Mosley, who was to present in the earlier morning session. Dr. Mosley, representing the president of Tennessee State University, Glenda Garber. We understand the pecking order around here.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being accommodating. By the time I got over here from a myriad of representing Dr. Glover, you all broke for lunch, so I wasn't able to greet you. But on behalf of Dr. Glover and her cabinet, the Board of Trustees, and we, as a part of our TSU family, we welcome you to our campus. How many TSU alums do we have? If you just raise your seat. Well, welcome home. You're always welcome to be with us. Dr. Glover always likes to recognize the alum because you really carry our brand across the country and really all over the world, and so we appreciate that. This conference is such an important part of the fabric of Tennessee, of Nashville, and we are happy to sponsor this type of conference annually. And I've been looking at information about it on Twitter and Facebook and other forms of social media because this is we really want to have opportunities like this to reach out to the youth, reach out to the community, and give them a historical perspective they could not get anywhere else. And so I hope that you have had some great sessions. I've looked at the program. It looks very inviting. We hope that you will continue to look to us to be sponsors of this program on an annual basis because this really informs us. It's great for our faculty, staff, and students. And again, you are welcome anytime the opportunity presents itself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mosley, and give our regards to our president. We want to continue to recognize our financial supporters. At this time, we have support from Holy Trinity Episcopal Church. If you're a member of that church, would you stand? If you're representing your church, Jefferson Street Baptist Church and Spruce Street Baptist Church. And, we can always use more supporters. So if your church or organization would like to support this conference, it all looks easy and smooth, but it's a lot of work that goes into this, and it takes money to do things. So we accept donations from other groups that might want to do that. As well, we want to recognize the TSU Friends of the Library and the Firestone Foundation. Also, I'd like, before we get into the presentations, I was talking about the energy and just how wonderful the conference is, you know, seeing old friends and meeting new people. Such a wonderful place to make connections, and we all have obviously an interest in history and preserving our history. And seeing the young people here, you know, that lets us know on the committee that there's a legacy that will be continued, and we want to encourage young people to come to the conference because we're going to pass the torch to you, and we need to keep our history alive and well, and really a lot of that depends on the youth. So if you're new to the conference for the first time comers, some people left after lunch, that's okay. But if you're new to the conference, stand up. There's some newbies. Look, isn't that wonderful? Wow. That's really more than I had, you know, anticipated. That's the energy I feel. That's the energy I feel. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, there are a couple of announcements I need to make, and then we'll get on with the program. TSU wanted to make sure that they had equal time with Fisk University. So I got all these pieces of paper, so we want to let you know at the Avon Williams campus, where you are now, tomorrow 1 to 2 p.m., we'll have spiritual songs, music that built a nation, so you're all welcome to attend that. You know, all the American music all came from African American culture, so starting with those spirituals. So please come out and attend that free program. There is a wonderful exhibit here downstairs in the Avon Williams campus in the library, and it's by Billy Martinez, and it's called Theme, the Art of Billy Martinez. And his art is on display. They've already had a reception, but his art will be on display through the month of February. So please go downstairs and take on your way out and take a look at the art. The library here always has wonderful art exhibits. And usually, you know, you get the receptions, you get to talk to the artists as well, and it's very nice. But also on the main campus, through the month of February, starting Tuesday, February the 27th, from noon until 1:30 p.m., this is a brown bag event, and it's called Quilt Talk. And the theme is Visions in Cloth, and the communicator is Glenda Alvin, and she's a member of the American Quilters Society, the Tennessee Valley Quilters Association, and a number of other groups. So if you like the quilts, and this would be also something you can put on your bucket list for the month of February. And I think that's all the announcements that I had to make at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first presentation, again continuing with our theme this year, a panoramic view of African American history of Nashville and Tennessee. And the next presentation is called Reclaiming Martin Luther King in an Age of Trumpism, the Enduring Challenge. This presentation research has been done by Dr. Lewis B. Baldwin, a noted historian. He is a native of Camden, Alabama, was educated at several universities, including Talladega, Crozer, Northwestern University. He taught at the College of Worcester in Ohio, Colgate University in New York. He was a professor of religious studies at Vanderbilt University here in Nashville for almost 30 years. He also taught courses at the American Baptist College and at Fisk University. He is the author of 6 books on Dr. Martin Luther King, co-author of 2, an editor of 2, and co-editor of 2, for a total of 12 books on Dr. King. Indeed, he's an expert on Dr. King. And he's currently living in Nashville. He's continuing to write books and articles. He lives here with his wife, Jacqueline. Unfortunately, Dr. Baldwin had an emergency today in his family. At some point in time, take a moment of prayer for the Baldwin family. If it wasn't for this unfortunate incident, I'm sure he would have been here. So I'm sure he would have been here. He's a fine, outstanding scholar. And our own Linda Winger, Professor Linda Winger, will present his paper.
Thank you so much. It is an awesome and a daunting task to stand before you and present Dr. Baldwin's paper on remembering Martin Luther King in the age of Trumpism, the enduring challenge. 2018 is a very special year in our history and in the life of this city, this state, and this nation. In part because we are remembering and celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 50 years after his assassination. We recall this mesomatic hero, this martyr who walked across the stage of history and who left a legacy of altruism, service, and sacrifice that shall endure with undying radiance across the annals of time. We remember Dr. King's often repeated declaration that life at its best is about reaching for the very best within ourselves. We recount his efforts to bring us together as a nation around the core values of freedom, justice, equal opportunity, and peace. We recall his struggle to make the American dream a reality for all of God's children. And we remember a man who led not by the power of his position, but by the power of his ideas. When Donald Trump was elected president slightly more than a year ago, I, having written about King for more than 3 decades, immediately thought of the great civil rights leader, the great drum major, and what he might think about this time and this episode in our history. Mindful of how Mr. Trump had conducted himself during his presidential bid, I asked myself, what does the election of Mr. Trump mean for the continuing realization of Dr. King's dream? Is there any consistency or congruity at all between King's America dream and Trump's promise to make America great again? Will Dr. King become more of what Vincent Harding calls a convenient hero for this nation? Or will he become even more of an inconvenient hero? What will happen to Dr. King's lofty vision of a nation and a world defined by high idealism and the principles of respect for diversity, genuine interpersonal and intergroup living, mutual acceptance, and shared power? Clearly, the answers to these and many other questions are emerging with the unfolding of time and in the diverse ways in which so many of us are responding to Trumpism, or what might be called the Trump factor, or the Trump phenomenon. Trumpism is encouraging, inspiring, and actually spearheading many developments in our society which pose a threat to the continuing realization of Dr. King's dream. which signal a turning back of the clock when it comes to higher human and ethical values, and the true flowering of participatory democracy. First, the breakdown of reality-based, rational, and critical analytical thinking. In other words, Trumpism has created a climate in America in which reality is undermined in favor of and I quote, alternative reality. That does not exist. Facts in preference for alternative facts, and it seems at times that those who control our government are not capable of thinking in line with the dictates of reason and a careful process of intellectual discipline and discernment. We are witnessing an endless assault on truth and rationality, a growing intolerance for dissent and freedom of thought, and those in power are feeding us daily a mizimama of misinformation and conspiracy theories designed to monopolize the flow of information. Lofty idealism is surrendering to small-mindedness, mindless nihilism, narrow interest, and downright pettiness. Sadly, we are drifting more and more away from Dr. King's image of an enlightened society that cherishes an open and analytical mind and an unwavering search for truth. And that is grounded in the best lights of reason. Trumpism is also encouraging in this nation a radical departure from basic standards of civility and decency, which are essential to great leadership and character and the building of community. This is my second point about contemporary challenges to Dr. King's legacy. Throughout the last presidential campaign and during the last year of the Trump presidency, civilized conduct, courtesy, and empathy have too often been sacrificed on the altar of incivility, outright rudeness, and blatant inconsideration. All too many of the strongest supporters of Trumpism frequently ignore and even scoff at the idea of political correctness and are not known for greeting their critics with genuine respect, kindness, and hearty exchanges of civility. The 2016 contest was actually unprecedented in this regard. And since that time, we have been increasingly exposed to a society that seemingly grows more hostile every day. We see it in the escalating incidents of road rage and bullying in our schools, and also in the epidemic of gun violence and mass shootings in schools, and even in churches. Unfortunately, Dr. King's proclamations about the senselessness and futility of violence and about the wisdom of nonviolent resolution of conflict have become a quaint remnant of a bygone era. Guns are turning our land into a culture of death. We as a nation need to return to fundamental standards of decency, of civility, for only in this way can we overcome the lingering feelings of anger, bitterness, disenchantment that are still abound. If we are not careful, words like dignity, ethics, and professionalism will no longer mean anything in this country. Let me say, thirdly, that Trumpism is contributing to the normalization and/or legitimation of forms of bigotry and intolerance. I think you would agree that this is among the ugliest and most offensive and painful aspects of Trumpism. and there is no greater threat to Dr. King's dream and legacy. Mr. Trump's disparaging comments about Mexicans and Muslims and his overall record of dealings with women and people of color would have been disqualifying and ultimately self-defeating for any other candidate who pursued the presidency over the last few political cycles. But Mr. Trump won, and essentially the struggle for an authentically free, democratic, and inclusive America is taking a giant step backward in this era. We are all familiar with the disturbing succession of racist behavior and hate crimes since the election of Mr. Trump. The appeal to the likes of David Duke and Richard Spencer, the trafficking in racially tinged rhetoric, the enactment of official governmental policies that explicitly or implicitly target racial and religious groups for incarceration or deportation, the scapegoating of black and brown immigrant populations, the rescinding of DACA or the deferred action for childhood arrivals. The list goes on and on, all occurring at a time when the browning of America is feeding into certain kinds of cultural fears and anxieties. Trumpism, encouraged by Fox News and other conservative media, is essentially a white nationalist and white supremacist agenda. And the president himself has become the savior, the redeemer, the champion of the alt-right, and the larger forces of white nationalism and supremacy. Perhaps his successful presidential bid exposes our growing inability to experience moral outrage in the face of racism, sexism, homophobia, and Islamophobia. If the election of Mr. Trump taught us anything at all, it is that all too many in this country, especially in white communities, remain determined to resist the kind of society that Dr. King envisioned and for which he fought so gallantly. We have reached a point of moral reckoning in this land when it comes to bigotry and intolerance. And Dr. King's devotion to the cultivation of a culture of openness and enlargement should be a special challenge to us all as we confront the forces of Trumpism. My fourth point, Trumpism is contributing to the growing lack of a programmatic thrust in the interest of the poor and the needy. Clearly, Trumpism is reinforced and sustained by the rich and the powerful. And like divas looking down on Lazarus, they are ill-prepared politically and morally to put in place policies that truly uplift and empower what Dr. King called the least of these, my brethren, or the have-nots. 2/10 of the top 1% in America benefit more than anyone else from the Trump tax plan. And once again, the rich prospers at the expense and the neglect of the poor. Trumpism is fundamentally ill-suited to really address the abject poverty, the absence of vital health care, the homelessness, the growing disparity in wages between the haves and the have-nots, and the kind of economic anxiety that still engulfs large segments of this society. Dr. King died fighting for the poor, planning a poor people's campaign, marching with the sanitation workers, and if we are serious about honoring him annually, we would heed his call for the generous and compassionate use of accumulated wealth. If you are interested in what might be called Dr. King's message to Mr. Trump concerning the poor and the needy today, I urge you to read his powerful sermon on the rich man and Lazarus. My fifth point, Trumpism is breeding a mounting disgust of well-established structures and institutions in America. Mr. Trump is consistently bombarding us with shameful and repulsive attacks on the free press, with the most negative images of the judiciary, the two-party system, the intelligence community, the Justice Department, and other structures and institutions that have claimed so much of our loyalty over time. Some are describing this terrible scene as Trumpism gone amok, a problem heightened by tribalization of American politics. The Constitution of this nation and the very fabric of our democratic ideas and ideals are being undermined and even trampled under the authoritarian tendencies of Trumpism. I believe that Dr. King's vision of an America that lives out the true meaning of her democratic creed and ideals as expressed in great documents such as the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence has very powerful and enduring political renaissance in these times. My sixth point, Trumpism is promoting a disturbing tendency toward isolationism. Mr. Trump's assault on globalization, while pushing a kind of self-centered America first, nationalism and isolationism stands in stark contrast to our traditions of participatory democracy, ecumenical loyalty, and active engagement with and moral leadership in the world. For Trumpism, the goal is to make America great again, and not so much to struggle in conjunction with other nations for a stronger and more just and peaceful world. The tendency is to look inward rather than to look outward, or as Dr. King put it, to live as if self-preservation rather than other preservation is the first law of life. Trump's America's first doctrine on so many levels is becoming an America alone or an American only doctrine. Our country is not only abandoning the very ideas and ideals it has spread worldwide, it is also retreating from moral leadership in the world, isolating itself from its own allies, using name-calling, threats, reprisals as a tactic in U.S. diplomacy, and emboldening its enemies or its adversaries. The abandonment of the Paris Peace Accords, the effort to decertify the Iran nuclear deal, and the escalating crisis with North Korea expose a nation increasingly on the wrong side of history. Dr. King often warned about the perils of isolationism. In his very two last books, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, and The Trumpet of Conscience, he challenged us to a greater awareness of our world citizenship. He framed this issue in terms of the social nature of human existence and the interrelated structure of all life and reality, declaring that what affects one of us directly affects all indirectly. Dr. King also used the metaphors of the great world house, the worldwide neighborhood,
and the global village to convey his vision for all of humanity. There is no greater tribute to Dr. King during his 50th anniversary of his assassination than to reclaim a healthy sense of the essential oneness of humanity, irrespective of national boundaries and the artificial barriers of race, religion, politics, and culture. King's legacy reminds us that humanity functions best not when walls of separation are constructed, but when bridges of unity are established. My seventh and final point, Trumpism is the force behind the silencing and co-optation of potential prophetic voices and profiles in courage. Dr. King embodied and believed deeply in the necessity, power, and efficacy of prophetic and courageous leadership in any society. So we can only imagine what he would say about so-called spiritual and moral leaders who remain silent in the face of Trumpism. King regarded the Christian church as the moral guardian of this society, the voice of conscience, and he, I think, would be appalled at the lack of moral seriousness that people of faith are bringing to a critical analysis of the current political quagmire that is Trumpism. Small wonder that there is so much spiritual and moral emptiness in the land. People of faith have lost their voice or cannot find their voice. As long as this is the case, the power and abuses of Trumpism will continue, unabated, unaccountable, and unchecked. Dr. King's often repeated words should become our motto in these days. The beauty of America, he declared, is the right to protest for right. We can find some relief and hope in the fact that Trumpism is recharging calls for social justice and social change in America and abroad. And leadership is coming from groups like Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. And interesting enough, women are the face of the resistance against Trump. It is largely due to their voices and their activism that Trumpism is rapidly losing public support and moral authority. And it just may be through the prophetic voices of women that the vision of Dr. King for humanity is not only expanded, but made more meaningful, more applicable, and more sustainable for these times in our history. And I thank you for Dr. Baldwin.
Those were some powerful words. Wake you up. Wake you up. 7 things to carry home with you, and be a voice, find a cause, have a passion, stand up for what you believe in, and make a difference, young people. You know, it's up to you. And Dr. King is not just a word in a book or something. His legacy lives on. And the struggle is not over. And we need to be drum majors for justice and learn those steps to conflict resolution. It's not about violence, and there are ways to resolve issues and lessen problems and move towards that beloved community that Dr. King talked about. And just that kind of presentation just brings back so many memories and thoughts, and it just all brings tears to my eyes because there's so much work yet to be done. And just look around the room, you know, this rainbow. You know, we are the community, we are America, we are what King dreamed about. Okay, let me stop because I'm going to start preaching on that. Don't get the cane on me. Anyway, that was so wonderful, just timely. The next presentation, oh, and by the way, you do have an evaluation form. I don't want you to wait till the very end of the program and forget about filling this out and turning it in to anyone on the committee. There are people, you can give it to me, but make sure you do that because we do pay attention to what you say and what you suggest. And like Dr. Mitchell said earlier, if you have ideals or things that you would like to hear at this conference, topics, maybe you would like to present a paper or topics or people maybe we need to do a profile on. So let us know. Your input is very valuable to us. So do fill this out and turn it in. We would appreciate that. The next presentation is Dr. Herbert L. Clark. And I go way back with Dr. Clark to Metro schools when they were first integrating schools. We've been there, done that. And at Tennessee State University is my colleague in the history department. And Dr. Herbert Clark is still with us, and he's one of our elder historians. He's going through some, well, you are, it is what it is, more power to you. So I'm so happy to see him. I know he's been through some illness, and God be with you, and God is good. So Dr. Herbert Clark was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, received his undergraduate degree at Rusk College and also a degree from Middle Tennessee State University. He taught in the public schools of Columbus, Mississippi, and Nashville, Tennessee, and also became professor at American Baptist College and Tennessee State University. He has written several books and articles, 3 books since his retirement. Some of us never retire, and that's a good thing. And his current book is available. I hope you picked up a copy from him. Is on James Carroll Napier, Uplifting a Race. Dr. Clark, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I thank you, Gloria, Professor Gloria. I want to thank Linda Wynn, Professor Wynn, and her associates for inviting me to come out and share my definitive study of the life and time of James Carroll Napier. My book is entitled James Carroll Napier, Uplifting a Race, 1845, 1940. You can purchase a copy of the book in the atrium. Indulge me while I read excerpts from a tribute statement by the trustee board of Meharry Medical College to J.C. Napier during the waning years of his life. It speaks volumes about the essence of the man. And I quote, "We, the trustee board of Meharry Medical College, count ourselves blessed to have contact with the noble life of our comrade and co-worker, the Honorable J.C. Napier. In disposition, he is kind, moderate, affable, non-resentful, companionable. In judgment, he is sound and a safe leader. In moral character, he enjoys an enviable reputation. That's a lot, isn't it? He has a large vision of the possibilities of his people. Perhaps the greatest joy that can be paid him is that he has been a servant. For he who is the greatest, for he who has been a servant, for he who is the greatest of all is a servant of all, unquote. Napier's legacy is relevant today. He was among those African-American men and women who demonstrated persistent commitment to racial uplift and made contributions of significant and enduring value to the black community, to the whole community of Nashville. He was the most prominent of this small group of men of elite, wealthy, well-educated, influential African-American men and women who dominated the politics, the culture, business, and leadership in Nashville for generations. Napier was born the first child of William Carroll Napier and Jane Elizabeth Watkins on June 9, 1845, in Dixon County, west of Nashville. His slave master, Dr. Elias Napier, a physician, was his grandfather and owner of the iron plantation on which he was born. His paternal grandmother, Judy, was Dr. Napier's seamstress. You've heard that before, who gave birth to 3 other boys and a girl, all fathered by Dr. Napier, the slave master. As a product of this biracial environment, but conservative environment, biracial but conservative environment rather, J.C. Napier developed moderate views on social and political issues instead of extreme liberal or radical positions. He subsequently became an accommodationist. That was a temporary stance, by the way, who espoused conciliation by African Americans in race relations and gradualism in pursuit of their civil and political rights. Dr. Napier died at the age of 65 on June 7, 1848 in Dixon County, Tennessee. J.C. Napier recalled, and I want to quote, "My grandfather was a man of considerable force of character and influence," unquote. The will provided freedom for Judy and her 5 children and several other slaves. The ex-slaves were bequeathed certain sums of money which they had in their possession at their death. The will instructed the slaves to leave Davidson County within 12 months. So Judy and family settled in 2 different places before they reached the final place where they settled down, Richmond, Virginia. J.C. Napier's father and family returned to Nashville in 1850, whereas his other siblings became teachers in Richmond and one moved to St. Louis, Missouri. But William C. came to Nashville with his family, and he was here by 1850. And by 1855, William Carroll had entered the livery business, from which he made a good living, and he rented carriages and broke young stock. William C. Napier's family did not fit the mold of the average free Negro family. They all either had a college education or either graduated from college or they attended college. J.C. Napier himself attended Wilberforce in Ohio, Oberlin in Ohio, and of course, Howard University Law School. Now, Oberlin was the first school of higher education that accepted women and African Americans. Napier was a student in Ohio during the Civil War. However, he visited his parents in Nashville during the war. On one of his trips to Nashville, in February of 1862, Napier recalled, and I quote, "When the Battle of Fort Donelson was fought, I had just returned from Ohio. I witnessed the entry of federal troops into Nashville," unquote. On February 23rd, 1862, at the request of John B. Lindsley, head of the medical school of the University of Nashville, young Napier used one of his father's carriages to transport the mayor and other authorities to the riverfront, so they could cross over to Edgefield and surrender Nashville to the Union Army. And Napier watched the proceedings from the west bank of the Cumberland River. Napier withdrew from Oberlin at the end of his sophomore year in 1868. He returned to Nashville and participated in the reconstruction of Tennessee immediately, getting a job as a page in the state legislature. And when that session was over, the legislature, when it adjourned, he was appointed by Governor William Brownlow as one of the 3 county claims commissioners for Davidson County. This specific job of the specific task, of the commissioners was to audit claims against the state for destruction of property by soldiers of the Confederate and federal armies during the Civil War. They examined claims amounting to millions of dollars. William C. Napier, J.C.'s father, was able to collect about $7,000 in claim money. Following the completion of Napier's work as a county claims commissioner, John Mercer Langston, the second most prominent black in the country, had just organized and became dean of the Howard University Law School, made a visit to Nashville to convince Napier's parents to let him enter law school at Howard University. After receiving his law degree in 1872, that was the second graduating class of black lawyers in this country, by the way, J.C. Napier returned to Nashville to practice law after law school, but black attorneys serving the poorest class of citizens had a hard time making ends meet. In the words of Napier, and I quote, there was not opportunity for Negro lawyer. So I entered the Internal Revenue Service, unquote. And 6 years following accepting a post with the Internal Revenue, he perceived that the political climate was favorable for him to run for a seat on the city council. And no black has sat on the city council of Nashville since 1868. He wisely chose Ward 4. Ward 4 stretched from the Capitol on the east side to Fisk on the west side. And in that ward, you had working and middle-class Negroes where they continued to vote. You know, the vote was really taken away from black Tennesseans in 1835. And during the campaign, Napier pledged that if elected, he would work to staff Negro schools with black teachers and officials who would provide role models for Negro children and therefore provide them with an incentive to learn. And this was the key of his crusade to benefit black people. Education was at the center of his quest for equality. Napier won the election. He won the election with 1878. Oh, okay. He was elected to the council 4 times, and he succeeded at accomplishing his goals. And so when he left the council, I could identify 2 things that you can relate to. Meg School had been established, and Pearl School had been established. And then he went on to, after he was elected, he went on and got married in D.C. to his mentor at Harvard University Law School. So Napier launched his political career in 1878 with his election to the council. And following that, he associated himself with Booker T. Washington. He and Booker T. Washington were close friends. He had met Washington in 1891, and they became close friends. And Washington was the most influential black in the country between 1895, when Fred Douglass died, and of course, 1915, when Booker Washington died. Washington had the influence, and so by being associated with Washington, Napier was able to operate on the national level. And one of the major positions that he was able to secure with his connection with Booker Washington was to become the Registrar of the U.S. Treasury. And he at that post, he used it to research the significance of the amount of money that land-grant colleges should be receiving. And he was able to ascertain that TSU was not getting its fair share of money due it under the 1890 Morrill Act. And so in 1913, TSU got an extra $12,000 as a consequence of his labor. And I understand my time has run out. I was just getting started.
Tell them to read your book.
And you may read my book. I do have several copies that I haven't sold, and I thank you for your attention.
We're running behind time.
Yeah, I noticed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. We are running behind time because we had morning speakers do their presentation this afternoon, so we're a little off schedule, but that's all. You can, I said, buy his book and you can read the rest of it. Our next presentation, the title of this presentation is The Impact of HBCUs, Educated African Americans in Small Rural Communities, of lifting as they climb to improve themselves and us. This is presented by Cynthia Avon Hobson, PhD. She's a cultural historian and higher education executive with the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry, for the United Methodist Church. Her work is with the 11th United Methodist related historical black colleges and universities. She received her BA in Mass Communication from Clark College, an MS in journalism from Murray State, a PhD from Southern Illinois University. She is a co-author of 2 books, the author of 6 books, 3 of them about Haywood County, her birthplace, the widely acclaimed Women of Haywood, Their Lives, Our Legacy, a collection of oral histories of professional African-American women in Haywood County, Tennessee, the times of challenge and controversy. And she's also done other works as well. She's married to Reverend Roger A. Hopkins, and let's present her now, if you'll come forward for your presentation. Let's give her a warm welcome. All right, I cut that a little short. We're running out of time.
I'll try to make sure that when you come really close to me in about 15 minutes that I'm wrapping up. Let me ask you to go ahead and just stand on your feet just to make sure your blood's still running. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead and stretch if you need to so you won't go to sleep. Thank you so very much. I am honored and humbled to stand before you today. I'm delighted to see you all, and I thank you for this opportunity. Luke 12:48 says, "To whom much is given, then much is required." For African American college graduates in small rural communities, many take this directive as their marching orders. When students went off to college, it was usually a community and family affair, and everyone played a part, so the African American college graduates from our HBCU became an important source of pride and great expectations. I'd like to read you an excerpt from the book that was mentioned earlier, The Women of Haywood, Their Lives, Our Legacy. And these are the words of Mrs. Nola Walker Bond. When I was in 8th grade, Papa wanted me to teach school. I didn't want to stop my school and teach, but by him being sick all that time, the State Department would let you take a test at the courthouse, and I was just a little old fast gal, and I just went on and took the test, just writing answers just as fast as they came. Wasn't trying to get a certificate or anything. I was just 8th grade. And lo and behold, one Saturday, Papa and my uncle came out and said, "Miss Mary said you got a certificate to teach, and they have given you a job down at the Flag Road School." That was 31. And my daddy died that year. When I started teaching, he was walking the street on his cane with me, telling everybody we meet, "I got a girl teaching school. I got a girl teaching school." And after my daddy died, we lost the farm, and I had a hard time. But I went on and finished high school in '34, and when I finished, I could go to Lane College. The entrance rate was $23 for the first quarter, $14.50 for the other 2 quarters. But we didn't have $23, but my mama sold the last cow we had to get me that $23 and whatever else I needed to go on. I never will forget that she gave me her last pair of stockings. It was a family affair. And whether it was the offering raised at the local church when the children came home from school, or that multi-folded $1 or $5 bill that Miss Jenny hastily stuck in your hand and said, "Here, go on, go." On your way back to the offering, from the offering plate, it was a community affair. And maybe sometimes it was the shared story of Mr. Robert, who always talked about why young people ought to go to college, because that's where you get your learning. Because he had been forbidden to go to college and had not had that opportunity. Or perhaps it was the premise of W.E.B. Du Bois's talented tenth that allowed us to depend on our HBCU college graduates to lift the entire race. And when you consider that there's roughly 14% of the African American population who are Black college graduates or who attended an HBCU, these numbers take on a new meaning when you realize that of this small number, they've produced 80% of the Black judges, 50% of the Black lawyers, 50% of the Black professors, and 40% of the Black engineers. Do the numbers. They're very impressive, and when you consider that in small rural communities, there may be only 1 or 2 college-educated people in each hamlet doing the lifting, this impact could be significant or negligible. I'd like to talk just briefly about some of those who lifted as they climbed and made their communities and us better. Here are some of the ways they achieved and served their neighbors and friends. First, by being role models, by providing exposure to a different lifestyle, by opening doors to bigger dreams, and maybe more importantly, simply by filling in the gaps. It was Dr. Irving, the Black doctor from Meharry, whose wife went to the jewelry store and bought the wristwatch with the second hand for young Eva James Davis Rawls when she needed to go off to nursing school. It was Mrs. Blanche Taliaferro, the music teacher, who showed a young Susie Ella Taylor Ashworth how to prepare for and act when dignitaries came. And then she taught her how to set the table and how to be appropriate, protocol-wise. Several years ago, at the funeral of Whispers trumpeter John Henry Parrish, Dr. Wesley Cornelius McClure, the 9th president of Lane College and John's boyhood friend, reflected on the influence that the Parrish family had had on his life and choices. John's parents were both college educated, and they had formal dinners at their house, and they listened to classical music. Dr. McClure talked about how he loved spending time at their house because he could dream of what he could become. Their home was very affluent and beautifully decorated, and he talked about how he dreamed of having a home like that of his own. And one of the luxuries that African American children had during segregation was that everybody lived in the same community, so you could see what you might be able to become. In the Douglas community in Stanton, Tennessee, where I grew up, Mrs. Mamie Dale Reeves Bowles Dodson, whose son, Dr. Harvey Bowles, many of you may know because he's a local physician, but he's Tennessee State and Meharry educated. She was a graduate of Lane College and had known the founder, Bishop Isaac Lane. She was the only college-educated woman for miles around. And she instigated and delivered holiday gifts for the patients at the mental hospital. She spearheaded the drive for the Easter seals, the Christmas seals, the anything and everything that was positive in our community. She had touched it, she had moved you to make something different, or she was at the heart of it. She taught the adults to read. She interpreted their government speak in the mail that they got. And with the children, she took them on field trips, and she saw them at church and at school and at home. And she knew their whole generation because after 43 years of teaching first grade, she probably taught their parents and grandparents. And she didn't mind threatening you and calling them if you misbehaved. Laura Pruitt Smith, in the Women of Haywood, shared that Mrs. Dotson's compassion was modeled and lived out daily. Mrs. Dotson's favorite song was "If I Could Help Somebody as I Pass Along." When I read Laura's reflections, I was moved to tears. And here's what she had to say about Mrs. Dotson. Mrs. Dotson was a blessing for me and my family. First of all, she was my first grade teacher at Douglas Elementary School. When I was in the 6th grade, my life changed and I experienced what true compassion looks like. My mother had experienced hard times and was unable to clothe all of her children for school. And we had been out of school for 6 weeks. Ms. Dotson, being concerned about us, came to see why we were not attending school. When she found out that we didn't have any clothes to finish the school year, she went and bought me and my siblings clothes to finish the year. And she worked diligently with us to make sure that we didn't have to repeat the same grade over. When I was older, I went to her and let her know that I knew what she had done for my family and me. And being the Proverbs 31:25 woman, she is dressed in strength and honor as her clothing. She just smiled. These HBCU educated graduates are busy doing these kinds of things wherever you find them. Almost every Maharian who settled in a rural community gets a significant news story when they die, simply because they have helped educate students, they have treated people without being paid, they have bought Little League uniforms. Whatever it takes to make the community work, that's what they're willing to do. For these servants to whom much is given, then much is required, is not just one of their favorite scriptures. It's who they are, it's what they do. It's about empowerment and making a difference. Why do they take this role so seriously and live these lives of service? And what are some of the common traits that they all possessed? First, they feel privileged. Not in the negative way, but they understand if they're the first in their family to go to college, they fully understand what a sacrifice it has been to make this opportunity for them to have a better life. Secondly, they will usually reach back for their younger siblings and pave the way through help with tuition, wardrobe and necessities, that kind of thing. Dr. Johnetta Neal was the first in her family to attend college, and her mother's youngest brother and his wife, both HBCU graduates and who are now teachers and principals in nearby Memphis, took her to an exclusive store in Memphis and bought her a week's worth of outfits every fall so she would understand the finer things in life. And as I said, Mrs. Dotson taught first grade for 43 years at the neighborhood school and used some of her earnings to help pay for her brother, Wayne Reeves, to attend Tennessee State, or as it was at that time, Tennessee A&I State University. He, in turn, worked at the university and helped many of the students by simply telling them, go over there to the business office and tell them I'll handle it. Again, that ripple effect continues today. Renowned founder and retired pastor of the Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church in Chicago, the Reverend Clay Evans, grew up in rural West Tennessee, and each year would bring his congregation to Brownsville for a fundraising day for scholarships to support college-bound students. Lifting? Absolutely. And while there weren't many choices of what African Americans could become, they knew that their choices multiplied exponentially by attending college. Humility is a key factor for the college-educated, according to Patricia Hill Collins in her book, Black Feminist Thought. She talks about the ridicule that educated fools suffered when they chose haughtiness and book learning over common sense, or mother wit as she puts it. She talked about the people who take a shotgun to kill a roach. HBCU educated African Americans want to invest in people and help them become productive, well-trained individuals because they remember that college opened doors socially, culturally, and every other wise for them, and they want to perpetuate their good fortune with the generations. They do it to empower. They do it to invest themselves in something greater than themselves. Miss Elsie Wilkes, a teacher in rural Hardeman County, never married, but took very good care of her money. And she built bridges all across the community. At her church, when they needed financing for anything, not $1 moved unless Miss Elsie said so. And Mr. Layman Johnson was also educated at Lane College and was a single professional man. In his memory book, after his death, there were reflections from the Carver High alumni group showing appreciation for how he had organized and kept them together. Someone else thanked him for his loyalty to the CME Church, another for leading his Boy Scout troop, another for serving the people of his county, affirmation that he was a fine Christian man, a treasured member of the 1175th Transportation Company, comments about his goodness, and a reminder that he'd be missed by so many for his advice and kindness. I don't know that there was a Be Kind and Lift As You Climb sign at every HBCU that these folks went to, but I'm inclined to believe that they made one if there wasn't one, and they meant to live it out. They wanted to make sure that their communities and the people in it became all they could be. Thank you so much for your attention, and God bless.
Thank you for being timely.
I saw you inching close to me, so I was trying to get out of your way for you. You know how they do, they take the little thing and drag you off the stage?
No, we won't do that. Give her another hand, and all our afternoon presenters have done a wonderful job. We appreciate all their hard work and research. Wonderful. Now we can stretch a little bit, and we're going to have a musical presentation. You young people begin to step forward as I read a little short biography about the Tennessee State University Master Singers under the direction of Dr. Susan Kelly. Take to the stage. They consist of 12 to 16 members and is open to both music majors and non-music majors. The ensemble performs at a wide variety of choral literature, from the Renaissance to the African American spirituals. Recent performances have included Spotlight Chamber performance at TMEA State Conference and several performances with the Nashville Philharmonic, including the premiere of Anthony Bach's Magdalene, a cantata which honors the work of Thistle Farms, and some of these members have also been chosen to participate in regional and national ACDA Collegiate Honors choirs. So give them a warm hand. Again, licensing, wonderful performance. They deserve that standing ovation. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Professor. Last but not least, We are down to our last presentation, and we are going to hear a paper, The Tennessee Travels, the music of Alberta Hunter and Lil Hardin Armstrong, presented by Dr. K.T. Ewing, who is a graduate of the University of Memphis with a doctorate degree in history. She is an associate professor of history at Tennessee State University, alum of Xavier University in Louisiana, and a third-generation HBCU graduate. She is dedicated in preserving Black cultural and intellectual spaces. Her research interests include African American history, women and gender studies, and the influence of blues culture in the American society. Dr. Ewing is currently on a biography, working on a biography examining the life of Alberta Hunter, a 20th century blues and cabaret singer from Memphis, Tennessee. Let's give Dr. Ewing a warm welcome. Someone left a bracelet up here at the end of the program.
Good afternoon. Look, it's Friday afternoon. We've had a very long day of being intellectuals, activists, engaged community members, all these kinds of things, but it's getting late. My time is drawing near. I will not have Professor McKissick come up here and Sandman me. I saw her do that for the first time 2 years ago, and I made up my mind it was not going to happen. So allow me to tell you a couple of brief stories before we get to the much anticipated closing remarks and the rest of our weekend. Is that all right? So let me start with one of my favorite stories. I grew up in Memphis, and as I often tell my students, in my very biased opinion, Memphis is the greatest city in the American South. And I know I take a risk at saying that. Right, there go my people, right? Because I'm always surrounded by hostile Nashvillians, right? And they're jealous. But Memphis is, it's a great city. And one of the beautiful things about growing up in Memphis is that most of the people there are actually from Mississippi, including my mother. My mother's from a little place called Columbus, Mississippi. Right? And as just about anybody who grew up in or around Mississippi can tell you, Saturdays are for the blues. My mother still says she doesn't know it's Saturday unless the blues is on. So she gets up early in the morning, cuts on WDIA, and you hear the blues blasting through the radio the whole time. Right? So when I was a kid, Saturday mornings meant that I would, one, wake up to the sound of the blues, that's great. Two, wake up to the smell of my dad cooking waffles, great. Three, wake up to the sound of my mother singing, which was not so great. And one of her favorite songs to sing, and it was always when she cleaned the bathtub, right? You know what position you have to take when you clean the bathtub, right? And she would sing this song by Chick Willis called I Want a Big Fat Woman. Right. I don't know if you've ever heard that song, but he says, I want a big fat woman with meat shaking on her bones, right? And so she's bent over the tub cleaning, singing this song just loud at the top of her lungs and shaking, right? And so that's what I always associate with the blues, right? That was my first entry point into blues music, right? Thankfully, blues has a somewhat different origin story, but I want to focus on women in the blues. Right? When you read a lot of early accounts of women in the blues, they tend to look at them as like these glittery showpieces, right? They have beautiful headdresses, beaded gowns and whatnot, but they tend to focus on how sexy they are, right? How sultry they are, and they sometimes come across as these side pieces, right? Or these decorations, as opposed to being integral in the creation of blues, right? As a style of music and as an aesthetic, right? As a lifestyle. One of the best things that I read about Lil Hardin, who I'm going to talk about shortly, was written by her biographer, Mr. James L. Dickerson. And he said, she wasn't the soul of the band. He's talking about her time in King Oliver's Creole band, right? She says, she wasn't the soul of the band, she was the brains of the band. And that's one way that we need to be thinking about Black women as not just blues singers, right, but blues producers, right, writers, performers, artists, right? And this is how we center their role. So today I'm going to talk about the music somewhat, right, but I'm going to talk about the business savvy of Lil Hardin Armstrong and my personal favorite, out of my professional bias, Alberta Hunter, right? And then a secondary focus of this talk is doing biography as a craft. Right? So if we go back to my favorite place, Memphis, right, it rests on the banks of the Mississippi River, right, and it's just north of the very fertile Delta region. It's a place where residents back then and now tend to pull their vowels like taffy. Right? If you ever listen to a Memphis person speak, listen to the way they pull those vowels. It's beautiful. Right? For whatever reason, I didn't catch it. I think it's because my daddy's from here. Right? I got that Nashvilleian in my speech, kind of messed it up. So in the 1890s, when both of these women were born, the city was in the middle of this transition, right, from slavery, right, then the Reconstruction period, and then we're having the comings of the early Jim Crow period. So you have this bustling port town, right, you have this city of New Orleans train route that is very integral to what's happening there. And so Memphis is like this hub of the Mid-South, right, and it's experiencing these really sharp growing pains, right. As a major southern city, right, Memphis is always wrestling with the tension between urban and rural lifestyles because, like I said, you're always having this influx of people that are coming from the countryside. And some of them like to pretend that they aren't just one generation out of the country. Right? I won't do that. Y'all are lucky I have on shoes right now. I will always claim the country, always, right? So it mirrors much of the rural South in terms of its racial sensibilities, right, and its cuisine, but it's always consciously styling itself as an urban oasis in the tri-state area, right? So let's talk about these two women from Memphis who achieved things that, statistically speaking, Black girls born in the Bluff City at this time should not have accomplished. But they did. So Alberta Hunter was born on April Fool's Day, right, this April 1st, in 1895. And Lil Hardin was born in 1898, right? When you hear some of the stories of when they were born, Alberta Hunter in particular, sometimes there's this myth about her being born on Beale streets. She wasn't, but we're gonna come back to that, right? I would love to tell you a story about how these two met as little pigtail girls running around Beale Street, but that's just not what happened, right? I wish, but we don't always get to tell the stories that we want, right? We have to be true to the record. So I'm going to tell a story about their separate lives and then take some moments to pause and look at when they intersect, right? So their lives take a path that looks like this, right? And they go away, right? So, let me skip down, because again, I'm looking at Professor McKissick here. She's got me nervous. All right. The best way to tell a story about the life of a Black woman is to ground it in sources, right, written by other Black women who are trained to tell these stories, right? And this is a really recent turn in the way that we do history, right? So although I love the book that was written about Alberta Hunter, it's a beautiful roadmap. It was published in 1989. Now think about the way that we did history as a profession in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And think about the turn that has taken place since then, right? And Lil Hardin's biography came out in 2002, right? So there are some other strains of thought that are in there, but I want us to think about what it means to write a history of Black women that doesn't include the works of some of your pioneering Black women historians like Deborah Gray White, right? Like Darlene Clark Hine, like Nell Painter, and even Angela Davis, right? So although these are fantastic books, you do not really see the works of Black women as academics in them, right? And so that's actually one of the things that drove me into the field, because as a marginalized person, you're often reading about yourself written by people who are very much removed from your community, right? And this is not to say that they can't do it, right? It can be done. However, there are certain perspectives that need to be brought in there, right? So If you're looking for some good examples of black women who do these biographies very well, I would suggest Valerie Boyd. She did Wrapped in Rainbows, which is a really good biography of Zora Neale Hurston. And then Paula Giddings wrote Ida, A Sword Among Lions. That is a fantastic biography of a pretty well-known black woman, Ida B. Wells Barnett. You may have heard of her. That's a really good one to look at. But back to my favorite city. Has anyone ever heard of a place called Beale Street? All right. So I don't have to do a lot of background on that, right? We know that Beale Street is associated with blues and barbecue, right? We got that covered. Now, Beale Street, you have to think of it as a hub of black Memphis, right? You have to think of it as a place where you have not just black music, but black people, right? This is where they are living some of their daily lives. They're conducting just the natural commerce of its time, right? And it's a place where sometimes you have debts that are paid in cash, right? Sometimes they're paid in promissory, and sometimes they're paid in flesh and in blood, right? These are human beings. Sometimes they, as we say in Memphis, they get to fighting, right? This is a rowdy place. Right. Now, when Lil Hardin Armstrong was born in 1898 to her parents, William and Dempsey Hardin, her mother wanted none of that. Right? She made it her business to keep her daughter off of what she considered a very sinful street. So when she wasn't in school, she made sure that her daughter was in the Hooks School of Music. Right? So her daughter received formal training in music, right? This is gonna make a difference in what she does later on, right? But no matter how hard Mother Dempsey tried, right, Lil was able to sneak off, right, as young people are really good at doing, right? And also, as she grew in stature, right, she used to tell this little tale about being a child prodigy, right? As a historian, some of my favorite stories tend to begin with a lie, but that can be really problematic, right? Because our job is to tell the truth. So whenever you read this thing about her being a child prodigy, she's taken some liberties, right? Because she had the benefit of getting formal training at the Hook School. Now, after that happens, her mother sends her to a place that, again, you may have heard of, Fisk University, right? Now, okay, Fisk, I see you. Right. She didn't attend the university program. She was actually enrolled in the college prep program. Right? And it's a pretty important distinction. However, her mother sent her there because she saw pretty early on that her daughter has a knack for music, right? And there is no better place in Tennessee to send a gifted child than to Fisk, right? Think about the influence of the Jubilee Singers, right? And at the time, I think the school had 20-something pianos there, right? I like to imagine that she just kind of ran through playing on all of them, right? However, she didn't finish the college prep program. She ended up coming back home, and she got into some modest adventures, right? And I'm taking some liberties with this because I need to be mindful of my speech. There's certain things that I would say in class that I won't dare say in front of my dean and my chair. It's just not going to happen, right? So she got into some adventures. However, her last adventure ended up with her being beaten by a broomstick because her mother caught her playing the devil's music. Right? And so she made it her business to beat the devil out of her. And after she did that, she packed up her child and moved her to Chicago. Right? So let's come back to Memphis. Right? There's this myth of Alberta Hunter's birth that just will not go away. And it is the myth that she often encouraged, that she was born on Beale Street. She was not. She was actually born on High Street, which is not too far from where St. Jude is now, if you're familiar with the St. Jude Medical Complex. That's actually where she was born. Now, she also grew up in a house with two of her parents. And this is where I want to talk about biography as a craft for a moment. Because in the definitive work on her life, right, the author states that her father abandoned the family. Now, think about what it means to write a book of a black woman, right, and then by larger extension, a black family, right, and this comes out in the 80s, and it's perpetuating this idea of absentee black fathers, right, and black men abandoning their families. This didn't have to happen, right? She told him repeatedly and wrote little notes saying, my father died when I was small, right? My father died. So my father was a Pullman porter. He was an excellent provider, but he died. But when you read the book, it says he abandoned the family. Now, here's how it happens, right? Because this is not about the biographer as an individual. This is about historians and the way that we practice craft, Right? When you look at the records, right, there are several Charles Hunters in there, and you have some C.E. Hunters in there as well. Right? I guess it was a popular name. Now, when he looked at the record, he went with the data for the C. Hunter that was listed as a common laborer. Right? And that man had some sketchy information, but people tended to move around, right? Had he privileged, right, and even fully respected what she said about her father, right, and his place in her life, then he would have at least put a footnote in there that said, well, look, this is what I found in the record, however, she said this, right? So this is why I want us all, as people who produce works, to just be careful of what we privilege, right? Because as historians, we're trained to privilege the record, right? And then what people say about their own lives, that tends to be secondary, right? But in a lot of cultures, that oral tradition is very important, right? So one of the things that we have to do when we're retelling narratives is to privilege what people say about themselves, right? Now, you have to be careful because, again, Alberta Hunter loved to lie, right? And so you don't want to get caught up in a lie that your subject is telling, right? So it gets dicey, but it's one of the things that I want us to think about when we're producing work. Now, although Memphis is the greatest city in the American South, around the turn of the century, she remembered that, and this is a quote, there weren't any options for us colored girls, all right? And so she did what anybody that's ambitious and talented and a bit mischievous would do. She left. Right? The story of her leaving is my absolute favorite because this tells us early on about her character. Right? She ran into her teacher, Miss Florida, and she found out that Miss Florida was getting ready to take a trip to Chicago. And she heard that women in Chicago could get $10 a week, and she wanted some of that money. Right? So Miss Florida said, well, yes, you can come with us to visit if you ask your mother for permission. Right? So she said, sure, I'll do that. She was going to the store to get some bread. She ran around the corner, put the bread on the floor, right on the ground, waited a little while, and then ran back to Miss Florida and said, my mama said it's okay. Right? And that's how she got to Chicago. Right? An ambitious child, right? So she gets there, she does not immediately start earning that $10 a week, right? She actually works in a boarding house, she's peeling potatoes, right? She's cleaning, and then she lies her way into clubs, wearing dresses that do not fit, and kind of trying to learn how to sing, because she's not formally trained, right? Now imagine what it means to be a poor little girl from Memphis who can lie her way to Chicago, lie her way into clubs, right? And then skillfully maneuver her way into a lifetime in music, right? Because she goes on to write 70 songs at least. All right, she learns how to sing in 7 languages. Sometimes she said 8. I have to be conservative here. She sang in at least 7 languages. Right? And unlike a lot of her peers from that early blues era, right, she didn't die in poverty. She collected royalties. She made sure she got that money. Right? Has anyone ever heard of Bessie Smith? Right? Do you know the song Downhearted Blues? Alberta Hunter wrote that. And she would often say later on during her second comeback career that Bessie got the fame, but I got the money. Yeah. She also tended to talk about race, right? She would weave it into her work. If you've ever seen the film, if you like old films like I do, Radio Parade of 1935, there's a song in there that she performs called Black Shadows. Now, here's where I have problems with the internet. When I was doing my dissertation, you could actually see a clip of Black Shadows on YouTube. It has since been taken down, copyright issues and whatnot. But I did thankfully get the lyrics before then. So she would make commentary like, people regard me with hatred like I was covered in sin. Must I appear to be faded all just because of my skin? Right? And she's singing this in the 30s in this film that's being shot in London. So she's going around the world singing about race. Right? And we have to think about blues singers in this tradition of artistic resistance to Jim Crow segregation, right, and to global white supremacy. Because when she's in London, right, this is not a place that's devoid of racism. Right? When she's in Paris, there's racists there. Right? And what she's doing is actually singing about these issues in her work. Now let's go back to Lil. She also enjoys a fabulous career. She marries a gentleman that you might have heard of as well, Louis Armstrong. Sound familiar? Right. The great Satchmo. Right. And they had a marriage that was just about as turbulent as any Hollywood love affair you can imagine. Right. So she was his first wife, but not his last. Again, when you read biographies of her, usually his name is in the first or the second sentence. And so again, when we're doing biographies of women, right, I want us to be mindful of how we tend to always position them relative to men. Don't get me wrong, Satchmo was a jazz great, right? He deserves to be mentioned. But if we're going to talk about Lil, let's talk about Lil for a while, right? And then talk about her connection to him, right? And then we can talk about how she actually helped to polish him, right? She gave him his shine. Those nice shirts that he wore later on, she made those. Right. So if we're going to talk about that relationship, let's talk about what she brings to the table. Right? She's not just his pretty wife who can play the piano. Right? She was the brains of the King Oliver Creole Band that brought him up from New Orleans. Right? And this is what it means to talk about them as a couple. Right? So in 1961, right, after Lil Hardin and Alberta Hunter have retired from music, they end up doing these recording sessions in Chicago, right? And it comes out with this series, Chicago, The Living Legends. Great stuff. If you have an opportunity, I definitely suggest you buying that, all right? So they meet again, they record a few things, and then in 1971, I'm watching Professor McKissick here. I'm gonna beat you to it, right? In 1971, after Louis Armstrong's death, right, she plays piano at a tribute concert for him, right? And see, somebody already knows where I'm going. At this tribute concert, she's just playing her heart out, because although Louis had several other women during and after her, he was the love of her life, right? And while she is playing, this woman falls over and dies. Now, I don't ever want to love anybody that hard. It makes for a beautiful story, and I believe in love. I don't ever want to love anybody that hard, but this is how she goes. So while she exits the stage in grand fashion, Alberta Hunter comes out of 20 years of retirement. Right? So she nurses, actually she lies about her age her entire life, and she becomes a nurse for 20 years after she retires from music. Right? And so then she is forced to retire from nursing because they think that she's in her 80s when she's actually in her 70s. And then she goes back to singing. And that's what she does for the rest of her life, right? And one of the beautiful things about her life is that, or I guess about her death, if death can be beautiful, she died the same way that she lived. She had her shoes on and she was ready to go. Right? She said, she told her biographer, "When I die, I'll die with my shoes on. I might loosen the strings a little, but I'll be on my feet with my shoes on." Now, she wasn't talking about the house shoes that she had on, but I do like that a woman who was known for telling a lie and a good lie. I love good lies. At the end of her life, she did keep her word. Right? So again, when we're thinking about biography as craft, right, we're entering into a kind of contract with our subject, be they living or deceased. Right? And so when we are going through these records, when we're going through their personal effects, I want us to think about what it means to keep our word to them. Whether or not they keep their word to us, whether or not they ever kept their word to anybody else, right? I want us to think about these three questions, right? Whose stories are we telling, right? How are we crafting these narratives? Because that part matters. And my favorite question of all time, and the favorite question of toddlers, actually, why? Right? Why are we telling these stories? Who are we doing it for, and what's the legacy of that? Thank you for your time. Please enjoy your weekend.
Dr. Ewan is powerful. I believe she could fill up a classroom at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. She's one of those kind of teachers, and I'm not going to story. Tennessee State has famous and fabulous teachers who have stories behind them. Professor Wynn, she reminds me of Professor Mingo Scott. Mingo Scott could fill up a classroom at any time. People would listen. When I was a teaching assistant, I said, please don't schedule my class anytime around Dr. Scott's class. This has been a wonderful day. It's been strong. You know, sometimes people say, well, historians are boring. These people were not boring today. Professor Landers, Dr. Bergnot, Professor Bird. It was just a wonderful conference. And for Linda Wynn to be daring enough and strong enough to stand up here and articulate the words of Lewis Baldwin, who is a legend, a theologian, and a professor. This has been a marvelous conference. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've benefited from it. I hope you will fill out your profile sheet, your evaluation. And finally, I hope you'll come back and join us in 2019 for the 38th Local Conference on African American History and Culture. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.